Are there any statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you. Australia generates more single-use plastic waste per person than any other country except Singapore. On average, we produce 59 kilos of single-use plastic waste per person per year, compared to the global average of 15 kilos, and most of this comes from packaging. Plastic packaging is the single biggest use of plastic, accounting for 36% of plastic worldwide. Nearly all plastic packaging is single-use, and hardly any of it is recycled. It ends up in landfill. Plastic pollutes our environment and contributes to climate change because it's made from fossil fuels. To reduce plastic packaging pollution, we must reduce the production of plastic packaging. The government's developing new packaging regulations to reduce waste, and last month sought feedback on the long-awaited draft options for reform. The regulations will increase recycling and ban harmful chemicals, but there's currently no plan to actually reduce fossil fuel plastic packaging. We can't recycle our way out of plastic pollution. We need to reduce the production of packaging and reuse the packaging that has already been produced. One of my volunteer groups, the Curtin Net Zero Waste Group, has been working with me on a petition that asks Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek to include measures to reduce plastic packaging use in the new regulations. With 12,539 signatures already, I hope the Minister will take note.
Call member for Parramatta.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I stand here today to advocate for January to be designated as Tamil Heritage Month, right across Australia. January is significant to Tamils worldwide, as it marks Thai Pongal, the traditional 4-day harvest festival that honours the sun, land, rain and agriculture that sustains us. Recognising Tamil Heritage Month would celebrate a culture over 5,000 years old, providing younger generations an opportunity to connect with their roots and inviting the wider community to appreciate Tamil contributions to art, philosophy and language. It would also honour ancient Tamil works like the Thirukkural and the Thirubalavar, which continue to inspire us with its timeless insights into ethics, governance and human values. This recognition would highlight the contributions of Tamil Australians in fields like business and education and public service, while fostering pride within the Tamil community. Economically, Tamil Heritage Month would benefit local businesses. Grocery stores, restaurants and clothing shops, for example, would see increased activity as the community prepares for Pongal. Recent Tamil cultural festivals have drawn strong support, with thousands attending, showcasing the enthusiasm for cultural celebrations and the demand for a dedicated Tamil Heritage Month. This is an opportunity to celebrate Australia's rich multicultural tapestry.
I call the member for Fowler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was honoured to take part in the Khmer community of New South Wales' 47th year celebration last night. Over 5,000 people in Fowler speak the Khmer language, which is the official language spoken in Cambodia. Khmer Community Inc. is a not-for-profit organisation located in the suburb of Bonnyrigg. This volunteer-based organisation provides a whole range of targeted services, such as language classes, to those who identify as having Khmer heritage. I have been very privileged to have been included in many of their cultural celebrations and activities over the past decade or more. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the committee members and leaders who've been part of the organisation's 47 years journey, especially all the presidents, past and current. I would like to acknowledge the current president, Mrs. Chanti Lim-Chum, and former presidents, Mr. Kem Kang, Mr. Ek Bung Ang Nik, Pong Seng Lei, Sok Han Yim, Song Kun Kit, Pon U, Lim Suon Meng, Bun Natai, Buti Chombrong, Sath Ray, Sang Hing Sen, Bunatai, Po Heng Ya, Savanaran Kai, Rito So, Mr. Daniel Lee, Mrs. Lina Tiong, Sean Yin, and Mrs. Ray Touch Kang. So I want to congratulate all of these presidents, past and present, who contributed so much to the Khmer community in the community of Fowler. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Call member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. On Sunday, the 27th of October, I, along with several parliamentary colleagues, including the member for Spence, attended the annual St Demetrius Parish Feast Day church service and celebration at Salisbury in honour of the church patron St Demetrius. St Demetrius was a 4th century AD Christian martyr and continues to be revered as one of the most important Orthodox military saints. The annual celebration is a significant event for Adelaide's Greek community, and particularly for Adelaide's northern suburbs Greek community, many of whom were amongst the first post-World War II migrant settlers in the region. As a regular attendee to the celebrations over the past 3 decades, I miss the presence of local Greek community leader John Gatsopoulos, who was tragically killed last year, and past parish priest, church founder and long-time friend Father Chris Tsouraclides, who has relocated to Darwin. My congratulations to Father Saramatis and His Grace Bishop Suluan, who led the religious service on the day, and to the St Demetrius parish team for putting on another wonderful celebration of Greek culture, food and dancing.
Call a member for Griffith.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. You want to know how much someone renting a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of Vienna pays? About $250 a week. Meanwhile, the average 2-bedroom unit in capital city in Australia, about $633 a week, if you're lucky. The difference is that someone in Vienna is living in one of the over 60% of apartments in Vienna, either directly built by the government or provided by a community housing provider or co-op, where rents are set at prices people can actually afford. In Australia, property is dominated by banks and property developers who want to maximise profit. In Vienna, almost anyone can move into one of these apartments with little to no income limits. Because these apartments aren't built to maximise profit, they are high quality, well designed, often integrating play spaces for children, rooftop gardens and other shared social spaces. Rather than just making them available to the lowest income in society, they are made available to a broad cross-section of Viennese society. So professors are living next door to teachers, next door to cleaners, next door to people on income benefits. What that means is that the income generated from that scheme allows the city to invest in building more good quality, well-designed housing. There is absolutely no reason why Australia can't adopt a similar scheme, and it's exactly why the Greens have proposed that we establish a public developer to build affordable housing people can afford.
Call a member for Swan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My community knows that I've called out sneaky surcharges on debit cards. Why should 2 identical items, both paid with your own money, cost different amounts? Over time, it really adds up. And this is some of the feedback I received. Thank you, Zanita. I absolutely want the charges to stop. Yes, Zanita, fight this. Thanks to those Swans local who reached out. Labor is taking action to ban them and ensure that everyone gets a fair go. On supermarkets, I called out the dodgy discounts. What did the people of Swan say? Keep up the good work. It's great news to hear that they're being held to account. We are getting this feedback because we're responding to what people need right now. What people want is a comprehensive plan to cut the cost for everyday Australians. And so today I'm also celebrating Labor's plan to make sure that everyday Aussies can use cash when they want to. And so the truth is when people go out and they don't have their card or their phone on them, they should be able to pay in cash. Labor will work on plans and consult with small businesses to ensure that they aren't unfairly impacted. Cash is a lifeline, especially when it comes to fuel and food. And for others, it will make sure that it's the difference between whether there's dinner on the table or not. We're making sure that cash is here to stay.
Call a member for Durack.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's Movember, which means we get to see fabulous men across Australia raise awareness for men's health by putting away the razor and growing a mo of their own. Earlier this year, I attended the launch of Movember's Real Face of Men's Health report here in Parliament House. Whilst it's clear that progress has been made over the years, sadly too many men are still dying prematurely, with 2 in 5 men dying before the age of 75. This is an issue that is particularly stark in regional Australia. And unfortunately, my electorate of Durack has the 5th highest premature mortality rate in Australia. This underscores the importance of ensuring access to quality health services in the regions for our men. Recently, I caught up with Jeremy and Guatem from Movember, who told me the 5 things that men should know and do when it comes to their health. Number 1, spend time with people who make you feel good. Number 2, talk and then talk a little bit more. Number 3, know the numbers. Talk to your doctor about prostate cancer. Number 4, get to know your private bits, boys. Check your body regularly and visit your doctor if something doesn't feel right. And number 5, move your body. A big shout out to everyone getting involved this Movember and for making a positive impact for men's health, including our Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
I call the member for Hunter.
Speaker, this year students in my electorate of Hunter were part of the Raise Our Voices campaign. Today I want to read a speech from 14-year-old Jack. I studied at a school that has no air conditioning or heating. This affects mine and others' ability to learn and concentrate within the classroom. This is due to the underfunding of schools in New South Wales. One of the most important things that a government can provide is a quality learning environment. This cannot be achieved when you're sitting in a hot, humid classroom or a freezing cold one. One single private school spent more money on a new pool and upgrades to their drama and fitness facilities than the government spent on public school funding that year. Private schools are given more of taxpayers' money than public schools, even though they need this money more as they are not-for-profit and they don't make money any other way. I'm proposing that government supplies public schools with the appropriate air conditioning and heating systems and to eliminate all private school funding as they make their own money off people who attend. In doing this, it should provide young Australians in public schools with a quality and comfortable learning environment. Thank you, Jack. There's nothing more important than a quality education, and keep up the good work, buddy. Cheers.
Call a member for Flinders.
I rise today to share a speech prepared for the Raise Our Voices competition by Lockie, aged 12, from Woodley Penbank in my seat of Flinders. I'm concerned about the high price of playing junior sports. Because of these costs, many kids stay inside and spend time on their phones or computers, which negatively impacts their mental health. When I return to summers at the age of 21, I want to see kids playing a sport outside with their friends and family. The way that the state and federal governments can help is by increasing grants for junior sports. Currently, grants are limited to $200 and hard to get, but the average cost of playing a sport for one season is $1,500. Increasing these grants would help reduce the 40% of Australian kids who don't participate in sports. Additionally, councils need to make sports teams more welcoming. Currently, 75% of people with disabilities who want to play sports don't because they feel they have limited opportunities. The government should encourage the youth of Australia to be active. It will cost the government less in the end when those kids grow up healthy. And on that topic, I want to share a great message that I received from young Mika Kelly of the Somerville Primary School, who I met last week at her school with her principal, who wrote in a couple of days ago. And she said, "I believe that we should ban vaping and smoking for good. It is unhealthy for the people who are doing it and for those around them. I've encountered people who smoke and vape and had to breathe in their smoke. If kids want to grow up healthy, we need to stop it." Thank you, Mika, for writing in and for meeting with me last week.
Call a member for Layla.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The member for Lawler is pleased to rise to her feet today to talk about some of the challenges that we've faced as a government and some of our achievements as a government. The first is that we've got inflation moderating. The second is we've got wages moving. We've got the gender pay gap narrowing. We've got employment participation higher than it's ever been, with over 1 million jobs created in the first term of a Labor government. We've delivered 2 surpluses, and we've done all of this facing extraordinary economic challenges. I wanted to pay tribute to our Treasurer and the team, the Assistant Treasurer and the Finance Minister, for the work that they have been doing in this space to ensure that Australians have a job, have a roof over their head. We know people are doing it tough. We know there's more to do. We know there's more to do in housing. We know there's more to do in education, and that's why we're moving into that space now. We have lowered energy prices. We're going to take 20% off people's HECS debts if we are elected at the next election. Labor is committed to a fair country, an educated country, a country where everyone's striving forward for fairness, for a fair go for all Australians. This Albanese government is committed to ensuring that we have economic stability, wages growth, and ensuring that we're creating jobs in Australia for Australians, and hence the manufacturing jobs for Australia. Thank you.
Call a member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It was a great delight, as it is every year, to attend the Trinity Gardens Primary School Fun Day last weekend. The whole school community do a fantastic job in pulling together what is a surprisingly, for the size of the school, significant community event. And people well beyond those in the school community come from all of the surrounding suburbs to support the school, but also it's just actually a very enjoyable, fun-filled day. So my congratulations to the School Governing Council, to the school principal and to all those who are involved. All members would have thriving school communities, and the primary schools in particular throughout my electorate do fantastic work in holding events that obviously raise money to supplement the activities that the schools undertake and to support the kids, but also add a real sense of community to the local areas in which they serve. And last weekend happened to be Trinity Gardens Primary's turn to have their event. It was an excellent day, but so many of my schools do similar events throughout the year, and they really do knit and stitch our community together so very effectively. So congratulations to Trinity Gardens Primary. Thanks for having me, and as usual, I look forward to being with you again next year.
Call member for Aston.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As the end of another school year approaches, I've had the opportunity to celebrate the achievements of so many fantastic students from across the electorate of Aston. This has been done through the presentation of the inaugural Tilly Aston Achievement Award. The award commemorates Matilda Ann Tilly Aston, the woman after whom the federal electorate of Aston is named. Tilly Aston was a blind writer, teacher, author and poet, and one of Australia's earliest disability activists. Among other feats, she fought hard for the rights of vision-impaired people to be able to vote. The award is to recognise outstanding students who demonstrate a commitment to strive for social justice, active participation in the community and have displayed courage to pursue change. Congratulations to all the winners of the inaugural 2024 Tilly Aston Achievement Award. And as Christmas and New Year approaches, I would like to take this time to wish my constituents of Aston all the very best. I hope it is full of love and joy and that you have a safe and happy time however you celebrate. For me, I take time to be thankful for my own loved ones and remember those family and close friends who I have lost. I'm also reminded of the very great privilege of being the member for Aston and of serving the good-hearted and generous people in this incredible community and the work they do for those who are less fortunate. And through my position as a federal member, I get to see some of the incredible work that those charity organisations, religious groups do throughout the year. And I want to pay my respects to them. So thank you.
Call a member for Deakin.
Well, thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's Fete and Festival season in the electorate of Deakin, and I want to congratulate everybody who's been involved with some really outstanding community events. Of late, we had the Maroondah Festival and Whitehorse Festival the last couple of weekends, but we've also had parent communities throughout the electorate working really hard to raise money for their local schools. I've been really pleased to spend some time and visit the Holy Spirit community, Fete, the Warrenwood Spring Fair, and of course have seen the great work done by Rangeview Primary, St John's Primary School, and a range of others that are just excuses to bring the community together and to raise some money for great causes. In the course of spending time at each of those events and speaking to literally hundreds, if not thousands of people from our local community, it's very clear that leading into Christmas 2024, many families are doing it tougher than probably any of them have felt they've ever done it before. The cost of living pressures that they're feeling, whether it be higher interest rates and higher mortgage repayments, higher energy costs, higher rents that they're paying, mean that for many this will be a very difficult Christmas. And my message to them has been there will be an election next year in 2025 and a great opportunity to turn the page on a government that's made their life worse, that's made them poorer, and we look forward to earning their trust in the election next year.
Call member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. And I wanted to highlight a number of important events that I was able to participate in, marking the contributions of so many Australians in armed services. It was terrific to join with Minister Matt Keogh to meet with veterans and their representatives in East Malvern and Waverley RSLs. And I want to thank everybody who welcomed us, who shared coffee, who shared lunch with the Minister and myself. It was a really important conversation that we shared, and I'm deeply appreciative of the experiences that people shared with myself and the Minister. It was also, of course, an enormous privilege to attend moving Remembrance Day services on the 11th of November. I laid a wreath and attended 2 events in my local electorate in East Malvern and at the Waverley RSL. And I want to thank all of those who were involved in putting these really important events together. There was great support demonstrated for local community groups and the observance of a minute's silence to demonstrate respect for the service and sacrifice of so many in our community over the years. I want to thank the President of the Waverley RSL, Neil Slaughter, and the President of the East Malvern RSL, Jeff Tobin, for their hosting and facilitation of these events, and to acknowledge the generosity and warmth of community that they foster, and know that I will always support the work of local RSLs in my community. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Call a member for Casey.
It was wonderful to be at the Lilydale show on the weekend, see so many familiar faces, meet locals and hear what matters to them. And it was a great event, lots of fun for the kids, young and old. There was pony rides, camel rides, reptile and wildlife displays, the wood shop, dog jumps and many more. But not just was there great entertainment, it was a chance for our community to come together, learn more and say thank you to the Lilydale CFA, but also to the Lilydale SES, and the car cutting demonstration certainly had a big attendance there for that as well. The Lilydale Cricket Club, which have the venue at their ground, was selling sausages, raising funds for another amazing community organisation. I was lucky enough to be part of the Yarraview Garden Centre Sustainable Scarecrow competition. Now, it was a tough field, so I vacated the judging, left that to President Paul. He had a very tough job. I want to say congratulations to the winners, the Churnside Park Primary School, but also to the other entrants, the Don Valley Primary School, St Mary's Primary School in Mount Evelyn, and also the Wandanyollik Primary School. It was a wonderful event, the community coming together, but it doesn't happen without volunteers, Deputy Speaker. So I want to thank the volunteer committee of the Lilydale Agriculture and Horticultural Society, led by the President Paul, the Secretary Heather, John, who's a life member, was there making sure everything was running well. It comes together because volunteers are prepared to give back so our community can stay strong. I say thank you to them all for a wonderful event.
Call a member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It was a privilege to attend Mass at St Monica's, Richmond last week to farewell John Maguire, my favourite Hawkesbury farmer. I met John about 15 years ago as a leading figure in Hawkesbury Harvest, which he'd helped to found to bring together local growers and producers in the region. He was pivotal in the establishment of the Harvest Trail, which encouraged visitors to buy at the farm gate and gave agri-tourism a boost in the Hawkesbury before the word really existed. John was also passionate about food security and the retention of farmlands on Sydney's outskirts. He hosted meetings with past Agriculture Minister Tony Burke and present Minister Julie Collins to share these and many other views. I delighted in visiting Enniskillen, John's orchard and barn shop in Grossvale, and his market stall at Richmond Good Food Markets, never leaving without my arms full of fresh produce and locally made jams and other delights. But more than anything, I loved talking to John, hearing of the Georgian home he'd grown up in Emu Plains and its untimely demolition, and I shared his conviction of the importance of maintaining a strong agricultural base in the Hawkesbury. I'll miss him, but not half as much as his wife Trish, children Angela, Lucy, Virginia and Adrian, and his 9 grandkids. His influence will live on and he won't be forgotten.
Call a member for Wannon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to give a shout out to those volunteers and professional emergency services that have been fighting the fires in my electorate over the weekend. One fire has been burning in the very northwest of my electorate and into a couple of adjoining electorates, and the other in and around a section of the Great Ocean Road. Obviously, the weather conditions that we faced in Victoria over the weekend were hot and windy, which meant that those bushfires needed to be put under control very, very quickly. And they also needed a rapid response, and that's exactly what occurred. The fact that year in, year out, that volunteers and professionals are prepared to put their lives on the lines to keep our local communities safe should not go without recognition. I know they all do it very, very selflessly. They do it not wanting recognition, but time and time again, they're prepared to put themselves in harm's way to protect us. With a bushfire season ahead of us that we know, as it always will be, will challenge us, I just say to everyone in the community, please take care and make sure that you contact the emergency services as soon as you see anything that might be catastrophic.
Call a member for Tangi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. One of the greatest privileges of serving the people of Tangi is meeting and listening to my constituents. There is much to be proud of, and my heart warms at our community and the action we take to achieve and maintain harmony. My heart also breaks with my community. Like many of my brothers and sisters from every faith and ancestry, I have had sleepless nights. There is so much grief and unbearable heartbreak due to the conflicts around the world. My constituents share their personal story of loss. Innocent family members, friends, loved ones who have lost their lives, who have been injured and displaced. They share stories of suffering, trauma, and of children who have lost their childhoods. We sit together talking through tears. And we are joined by many of my constituents who tell me how, even without a personal connection to places of conflicts, they feel distress and heartbreak. How could they not? We are all human. I've always advocated for peace, harmony, unity, and respect. And like many of my brothers and sisters in Tangi, in Australia, and around the world, we call for a ceasefire for all these crises to end.
The member's time has expired. I call a member for Ford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as the dust begins to settle, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the new Premier of Queensland, David Crisafulli, and his team on their successful campaign. Whilst we at a federal level like to let our state colleagues do their thing, I'm looking forward to working collaboratively with the new team. But I want to take this opportunity to recognise our state candidates and the wonderful job they did during their campaigns, and celebrate with a couple but commiserate with the others, sadly. Close to home, it came down to a few hundred or a bit over 1,000 votes in McAllister and Springwood, and Susanna Damianopoulos and my brother Rob Van Manen did exceptional jobs with their campaigns, but sadly they didn't quite get there. But also to Jacob Herremeyer and Matt Owen. Jacob ran in the seat of Waterford and Matt in the seat of Logan. They both ran wonderful campaigns in very difficult seats. And Matt got a nearly 13% swing, 9% swing to him and a 13% swing in Logan for Jacob, so it was a great result. Can I congratulate Michael Crandon and Mark Boothman in Khmer and Theodore for winning overwhelmingly, and look forward to working with them again. But I look forward to working with all state colleagues and congratulate again the new state government.
I call a member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Tiwi people have been rocked by the recent death by suicide of one of our own, a young woman in her mid-20s who to those around her appeared to be a beacon of light and positivity. This community role model, who I will call T, exemplified the remarkable progress which Tiwi women have made over the last 10 years. I'm referring in particular to achievements across a number of different sports, but note that sporting achievements have a significance which extends beyond the footy oval or the tennis court. They constitute a statement to the world that Tiwi women are the equal of men in society. The passing of T raises a couple of issues which bear careful reflection and consideration. First is the issue of private and often lonely pressure experienced by individuals who spend years living and working and being educated down south, who then return home to rejoice and contribute to the advancement of our people. Secondly, there's the issue of continuing inadequacy of mental health support services for young women across Northern Australia, in particular in remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. She was no means the first woman to go down this pathway, but going forward, Deputy Speaker, I'm totally committed to working for change, and I hope that the Albanese Labor government is too, and there'll be more to say on this, because the memory of young women like T must not just be another statistic.
Call a member for Bonner.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last Wednesday, my staff and I arrived at work to find that my electorate office had been graphically vandalised. We are fortunate to live in a wonderful country and enjoy the freedoms that we do, but callous actions like these completely undermine our shared values. Thank you to all the many locals and community groups who have offered their support, as well as my council, state and federal colleagues. Violence and vandalism are never okay, and the people who are responsible for this attack will be held accountable in accordance with the full force of the law. I deeply condemn the actions of those involved and am working closely with both our local and federal police to address this incident. Thank you to the Wynnum Police, the Federal Police and everyone involved in the aftermath. The clean-up and the new signage required will come at a great cost to Aussie taxpayers, most of whom will agree this is not how we have constructive discussions in our democracy. While it is becoming increasingly easy to find motives for distrust and divide, vandalism and intimidations are not forms of free speech. And while I'm certainly not the first member to have been targeted, it is important that we do not normalise such behaviour. Enough is enough. Behaviour like this is un-Australian and has no place in Bonner and Australian society.
Call member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, the Maggie Beer Foundation has partnered with the Australian Government, Department of Health and Aged Care, to provide training and mentorship for those working in kitchens in residential aged care homes. In Australia, sadly, it's estimated that 78% of residents in aged care are malnourished or at risk of malnourishment. This is an appalling statistic that our government is working with the sector to reverse. That is where the Maggie Beer Foundation steps in. The Maggie Beer Foundation is battling this alarming statistic by running face-to-face training courses for cooks and chefs, and has been doing so since 2014, providing the hands-on experience, peer-to-peer networking, and now an online training modules to help those, particularly in regional areas like my electorate, access the training. I'm proud to say that in my own electorate that Heathcote Health have signed up for such a program. The program is open to all 120 aged care homes and is open until 2025. Jenny from my electorate is one of the head chefs, and I met her recently during my visit at Heathcote Aged Care Facility. She said that her team has benefited from the program. The new menus being welcomed by residents and is inspiring others to think about food. The Maggie Beer Foundation is an amazing success, and I encourage other aged care homes to tap into the program.
Call a member for Hume.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This October, I joined Wandering Warriors for Polypedal 2024, cycling over 1,000 kilometres for 8 days across New South Wales, from Gosford through the Hunter Valley to Tamworth, Armidale, down the escarpment through to Port Macquarie. Since the event's inception by former Prime Minister Tony Abbott in 1998, Polypedal's covered over 25,000 kilometres and raised around $7 million for charities dedicated to a range of things, including supporting our veterans. This year we raised over just over $250,000 for the Wandering Warriors. It's a remarkable organisation dedicated to providing life-changing support and opportunities for our Special Forces veterans and their families. By raising funds, we're not only honouring the service of these courageous men and women, but also supporting programs that offer mental health support, employment assistance and, most importantly, educational support, are critical resources that allow our veterans and their families to build fulfilling lives after service. Every year it's a privilege to be part of Polypedal. Not only is it fantastic to be on the road with current and former parliamentary colleagues and some of our former Special Forces veterans, but it's also great to meet people right across this country from all walks of life and see the wonderful work they're doing. Thank you so much for everyone who sponsored us. 26 years on this fantastic initiative continues to make a real difference to the lives of Australians.
Call Member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I know you aren't supposed to have favourite children, but I have to say of all my election commitments, the health ones are my favourite. The urgent care clinic at Marion opened just over a year ago and has seen over 11,500 patients. That's 11,500 fewer people in Flinders Medical Centre ED being seen quickly and bulk billed. The endometriosis and pelvic pain clinic at Thrive Medical Practice in Glenelg is, well, it's thriving, serving patients from all over Adelaide. Our major tertiary hospital, Flinders Medical Centre, is 50 years old and it looks it. The Albanese Labor government has partnered with the Malinauskas Labor government for an upgrade of Flinders and the adjacent Repat Hospital. The end result will be an additional 150 extra beds, a new emergency department, a new eye surgery unit and much more. Already over 46 beds have been opened. At Flinders, this was repurposing of office and administration spaces into clinical spaces. And at Repat, it's meant the rebuild of the Geriatric Evaluation and Management Unit, or GEM unit. The Margaret Tobin Inpatient Mental Health Service is being built and expanded with double the beds. And add to this the tripling of the Medicare bulk billing incentive, which has meant an increase of 4% in bulk billing in Boothby, and cheaper medicines. This is transformational for healthcare in Boothby. And Deputy Speaker, these are a few of my favourite things.
Call a member for Fisher.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge three champions of the Sunshine Coast veteran community who've unfortunately passed away over the last couple of months. Bernie Verweyen, OAM, was a survivor of the HMAS Voyager incident, Australia's worst peacetime naval disaster. He led a decades-long fight for justice in a landmark legal case, and I'm going to be talking about Bernie in a few moments in my next 90-second speech. Erica Costigan, OAM, was a tireless advocate for veterans, campaigning for the commemoration of the Australian hospital ship Centaur, which was sunk by Japanese Imperial Navy in 1943, claiming 268 lives just off the coast of Caloundra. Adrian Nall was a World War II veteran who defended Australians along the Kokoda Track. I joined him for his 103rd birthday just a few weeks ago, and it was very sad to see him pass away just a couple of weeks ago, and it was very special for me to be able to be there. To Bernie, Erica and Adrian and their loved ones, on behalf of the Australian Parliament, let me say thank you for your service. Thank you for the support that you have given your veterans. And I say Vale, Bernie, Erica and Adrian.
Call member for Blair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to recognise the achievements of an outstanding local Brassel woman, Annabelle Johnson. Annabelle was awarded the Churchill Fellowship just a few weeks ago for outstanding work with people who have been impacted by natural disasters. She is a human and social recovery practitioner with 20 years' experience, guiding individuals, families and communities through days and weeks of immediate relief to long-term recovery, reconstruction and resilience. Annabelle's currently in Quilpie, and she's been visiting remote locations such as Charleville and Cunnamulla, working with local disaster management groups as they meet, plan and undertake exercises. Annabelle has played a critical role in coordinating human and social support services following some of Queensland's biggest disasters. She was recognised for her work in the 2011 Brisbane floods with the Emergency Medal in the Australian Honours. These floods cemented her passion for disaster recovery. Annabelle's prize by the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship will send her to the United States of America to further study the human and social impacts of disasters on aged care facilities and their residents, to identify best practice models and plans that could be adapted for use in Australia. She wants to ensure that older Australians in residential aged care in retirement villages or living at home are as safe as possible. It's her ambition to ensure we do evacuations and disaster management involving older people better. Congratulations, Annabelle.
Call a member for Fisher.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. On the 10th of February 1964, HMAS Voyager was struck by HMAS Melbourne in manoeuvres off Jervis Bay. The Melbourne cut Voyager in half, sending the Voyager to the bottom of the ocean in just a few short moments. And of the 314 ADF personnel, 82 tragically lost their lives. One of the people on board HMAS Voyager was a constituent of mine, Bernie Verwayan. Now, for all the lawyers who might be listening to this, you might remember that name, Verwayan and the Commonwealth. For nearly 30 years, Bernie Verwayan fought the Commonwealth in what was an incredibly unfair position that the Commonwealth took, and that case took on a special precedent in the principle of what we now call equitable estoppel, where the Commonwealth basically made a representation that it then sought to resile from. And the High Court, he took it all the way to the High Court and won. Here's a man that took on the might of the Commonwealth of Australia and won. And I was really proud to call Bernie a friend. He was a great servant of the country and his community in Mooloolah, which I'm very proud to live in today. And I say Vale Bernie Verwayan, and thank you, Anita, for being such a good mate to him.
Call a member for Bennelong.
Deputy Speaker, today I want to acknowledge the hard work of officers at the Ryde Police Area Command in ensuring the safety and well-being of the community of Bennelong. Recently, locals have been contacting me concerned about crime. Many have shared their experiences in reporting these crimes to Ryde Police Area Command. In response to this, it was great to read that Ryde Police Area Command ramped up their efforts to fight crime in my region. In early November, the Ryde Police Area Command carried out Operation Ripcord, a 2-day blitz across the area. Over the 2 days, this operation resulted in 14 arrests and 20 charges across a range of offences. The operation's approach was to enforce bail conditions, ensuring compliance with domestic violence orders, inspecting licensed premises and increasing high visibility patrols. This demonstrated that the Police Area Command are responding directly to community concerns. Importantly, 61 bail enforcement checks and 163 apprehended domestic violence order compliance checks were conducted, showing that our local police are ensuring that existing offenders are complying with the conditions of orders issued upon them. I know that many in our area are concerned about crime, and I'd encourage them all, Deputy Speaker, to report these matters to police. The more reports there are, the more resources that police can allocate to our region. And as always, Deputy Speaker, if a resident has concerns, me and my office are here to assist.
Call a member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Inner Wheel is an international women's organisation to create friendship, service and understanding between its members. It has clubs in over 100 countries with over 100,000 members. Deputy Speaker, Inner Wheel was originally founded in Manchester for the wives and daughters of Rotarians, although no Rotary connection is now required. And Inner Wheel, Deputy Speaker, comes from, if you think about the Rotary symbol, there is a wheel and inside it is a smaller wheel, that is the inner wheel. The Inner Wheel Australia has a major national project which is to promote cord blood research and is known as Read the Red every year. Last week I had the privilege of meeting with Inner Wheel Club of Liverpool Combined, led by Renata Lockwood as their president, and Liverpool Inner Wheel are currently fundraising for a variety of local organisations, including Lifeline Macarthur and Western Sydney. We discussed many things that are of interest to the South West Sydney, but particularly the lack of infrastructure funding, particularly the fact that this government has unfortunately taken away the rail and road infrastructure funding that was intended to link the southwest of Sydney to the Western Sydney Airport and then onto the Bradfield City. That was discussed. We also discussed the cost of living crisis, which is really impacting South West Sydney, as well as the cost of housing crisis. But, Deputy Speaker, Inner Wheel Liverpool is certainly doing their bit to combat these crises. Thank you.
I call the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. More than 25,000 students in my electorate of Newcastle will see their student debts slashed by a further 20% during the next term of an Albanese Labor government. That's 20% slashed from all student debt, whether you undertook a degree program at the University of Newcastle, you did an apprenticeship through TAFE or took out an apprentice loan scheme, you will get a 20% discount off your debt. Combined with the Albanese Labor government's other measures, making indexation fairer and increasing the threshold for when you need to start repaying the debt, we're wiping close to $20 billion in student loans, benefiting more than 3 million Australians. And that's about putting money back into the pockets of students and indeed those former students. Labor is the party of education, and when we talk about higher education, we mean both university and TAFE. We're also locking in 100,000 free TAFE places every year because under Labor, free TAFE is here to stay. We've introduced the legislation as a matter of urgency because we know that after a decade of neglect under the Liberals, Australia had the second highest labour shortages amongst the OECD, and we can't afford to go back there. Tragically, the Liberals and Nationals are refusing to back our plans to make student loan scheme fairer, and they're refusing to support our legislation to lock in free TAFE forever. It seems some people never learn.
In accordance with Standing Order 43, the time for members' statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 5, motion relating to Cyclone reinsurance pool.
I call the member for Kennedy.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it may well be asked by the free marketeers who still seem to run this place, why should you get preferential treatment? I mean, if the costs
Member of Kennedy, can you just move the motion, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. You'll have to... I move the motion relating to the Cyclone reinsurance pool in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
I call the member for Kennedy.
I can now speak to the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The free marketeers that seem to run this place, the moronic class who it's nice and easy free markets because you don't have to think, do you? And that's a wonderful advantage when dealing with people that have great difficulty in thinking. Why should you be treated differently? Well, I would say to you, why should we continue to run the cane industry and the cattle industry at margins that no other farmers on earth are asked to run their farming operations at? Why should we be asked to do that? Why don't we just close down the industry? Well, in actual fact, thanks to you people, there is no wool industry in Australia. The biggest export earning item in the entire nation's history for 200 years, and it was when the incoming Labor Keating government abolished the wool scheme. And now there is about 10% of our sheep herd left, if that. So why should we keep them going? Now that brings us to the subject of the cyclones. Why should you get... Well, if we want to grow cane, it grows very favourably where there is a lot of rainfall. And where you have a lot of rainfall, that usually involves cyclones. And America would be a good case in point, the United States. So I would answer your question that way. But, Mr. Speaker, the wonderful, the greatest governments that this nation has ever seen came out of Red Ted Theodore, and I'm very proud to say my family was associated with the foundations of the Labor movement. And very sadly today, the ALP stands for the exact opposite principles for which the Labor Party, the great Theodore Labor parties were formed. Labor Party split in 2.5 men in the Country Party, and that's how I ended up in this place. Let me return to the issues of the cyclone and the damage. Thanks, and I put on record my thanks to the member for Dawson, who showed immense courage, and one of the very few people that have come through this place in the 30 years I've been here that had the courage of his convictions, who again and again voted, and it was very traumatic effect upon him, against his party for things that he believed were the right things to do. And there's really little precedent for that in this place. But anyway, he was prepared to cross the floor, so we got out of his commitment the reinsurance bill. If myself and he started voting with the opposition, then the government would be in trouble. So the government, quite rightly, and I think, you know, they thought it was a good thing to do anyway, moved the reinsurance bill. And the incoming government has been very positive towards the reinsurance pool. Now, the reinsurance pool was founded, I hope I've got my facts right here, to overcome terrorism. 35 years ago, there was a couple of terrorism scares in Australia, and so they instituted this reinsurance pool. And it had about $15,000 million in it. It had never been touched for about 30 years. And we moved that the reinsurance pool cover extraordinary events in North Queensland. They don't occur very often. We have cyclones, yes, but most of them are fairly mild. And also modern housing can deal with a cyclone, even a strong cyclone, modern housing can deal with. The reinsurance pool was triggered for
the member's time
extraordinary events.
Has expired. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Sorry, I should have some time for my colleague to speak.
I second the motion, Deputy Speaker.
And reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Blair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Kennedy for the motion and acknowledge his strong advocacy for his constituents in North Queenslanders over many years. At the outset, as a fellow Queenslander whose community has been severely affected by natural disasters, I want to assure him that the Albanese Labor government is committed to improving insurance affordability for Northern Australian households and businesses. Our priority is to put downward pressure on insurance costs by addressing underlying risk as a result of more intense and frequent natural hazards. Deputy Speaker, I was on a parliamentary committee with the now member for Moreton. We looked into this more than a decade ago. The cyclone reinsurance pool is helping to put downward pressure on costs and delivering lower premiums for consumers in areas exposed to high risks of cyclones. It's backed by a $10 billion fund, and the member for Kennedy is correct in the way he put it. It came out of the terrorism legislation, he's correct, a $10 million Australian guarantee. It's also been administered by the Australian Reinsurance Pool Corporation. The government's committed to making sure that that pool is as effective as possible. There's an inbuilt review taking place in 2025, 3 years after commencement. It's all part of our broader efforts in terms of cost of living relief for people. We want to make sure there's downward pressure. Now, to put in context, we're talking about 3.3 million households. We're talking about 220,000 small businesses. We're talking about 140,000 residential strata and small commercial strata properties. That's why it's so relevant for the member for Kennedy to bring this motion, and it's a huge issue for Northern Australia. This is just one measure, this pool, in helping to take pressure off Northern Australia. So we're implementing the pool as legislated by the previous government. All major insurers have joined the cyclone reinsurance pool, and about 98% of home insurance policies are covered, about 98%. In October this year, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission reported positive early signs, and only early signs, that the pool is working as intended and starting to deliver savings to policyholders. And that was the evidence that was given in a public hearing in Brisbane with the Joint Select Committee on Northern Australia, which looked into this as well. Positive early signs, just early signs. The impact on prices is not what people were led to believe. at all by the Morrison government. And I recall during the course of that public hearing, we had people from Chambers of Commerce up in Townsville and elsewhere saying that they knew this wasn't going to have the impact that they were led to believe, but it has had some positive impact. Now, any change to the design of the pool will have to be considered as part of a comprehensive review in 2025. Now, also, the House of Representatives Joint Standing Committee on Economics has looked into this, and the member for Clare and I were both on that, which I was up there in Townsville and Cairns getting evidence from people. There's issues in relation to the 48-hour rule. There's issues in relation to a whole range of other factors associated with that pool. So, you know, if we broaden it out, it becomes more of an issue, and it could cover more of Australia. But this is important. There was really decades of neglect and natural disasters by the previous government in a whole range of areas. Now, we have put $1 billion over 5 years for disaster prevention and resilience projects through the Disaster Ready Fund, and that's really, really critical. In the October budget 2022, we provided $25 million for initiatives to improve affordability issues driven by natural hazard risk. We are getting on the job of putting downward pressure, and we've established a hazard insurance partnership to improve data sharing between governments and insurers to better understand where to invest to reduce that risk. And that House of Representatives committee, which was so ably led by Dr. Dan Molino, has made a whole series of recommendations that deals with natural disasters and floods. And I'm looking forward to the government's response, and I commend that report to the member for Kennedy. It's really worth having a look at what that says. Now, the ACCC is expected to publish its third monitoring report in December this year, which I expect will provide further insights into the impact of the Cyclone pool and savings for consumers in the 2023-24 period. We're going to consider the 86 recommendations from the flood insurance inquiry to which I referred and respond shortly. We know this is an important issue for all of Northern Australia, and we know that the member for Kennedy is passionate about it, and as a Queenslander, so am I.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Clare.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to join the member for Kennedy, and I think indeed the member for Blair, in wanting to ensure that the Cyclone reinsurance pool is effective and delivers meaningful assistance and help when disaster strikes in Queensland and Northern Australia, and in particular North Queensland, where the member for Kennedy is proud to represent. I am from central western New South Wales, but our area is all too familiar with natural disasters and how hard they hit, often without much warning, leaving enormous devastation and tragedy, where homes and sadly lives are lost as well. And it was only last Friday that my constituents and I paused to remember the 2-year anniversary of the 2022 floods, which devastated communities right around our electorate, in particular through the local government area of Cabonne, but also in places like Wellington. And it was a very sad commemoration, and we had a very poignant service, a small service to remember the lives lost in Eugowra on that fateful day. Now, as the member for Blair points out, the House Economics Committee has handed down its report on the inquiry into the insurer's response to the 2022 major floods. The report is called Flood Failure to Future Fairness, and there was quite a bit of evidence taken during the inquiry stage as to the effectiveness of the Cyclone reinsurance pool. And the inquiry looked at the views of stakeholders, consumer groups and councils on the feasibility of the reinsurance pool for flood. And the Australian Insurance Consumers Lobby proposed the Australian Government commission an inquiry into the feasibility of establishing a federal flood reinsurance pool. And Disaster Legal Help Victoria believed that the Australian Government should seriously consider government-supported reinsurance pools like the Cyclone pool. Indeed, Ballina Shire Council recommended that governments investigate options to provide a reinsurance scheme for areas that the insurance market is no longer able to cover at affordable prices. and indeed the Financial Rights Legal Centre, Choice, Consumer Action Law Centre and West Justice urged the inquiry to consider whether measures such as the widespread subsidies or an expanded government reinsurance pool should cover flood as well. And this was echoed by Legal Aid Queensland. And one of the recommendations that the committee made was that the Australian government consider measures to improve the affordability of flood insurance for existing policyholders with high flood risk properties, including the appropriateness of a government-supported reinsurance arrangement. Now, it's clear that there is strong appetite amongst stakeholders and residents around Australia for reinsurance pools. But as the member for Kennedy has pointed out, we need to make sure that these pools are effective and that they will deliver the required results. So I commend the member for Kennedy on his interest in this topic. It is a massive interest, I know, for his constituents and many in his area. And I think it's vitally important that the pool is effective and it does deliver affordable insurance coverage for affected residents. I think the member for Kennedy has stated that 50% of northern households in Queensland are either uninsured or underinsured. And this is a very concerning statistic which the member for Kennedy has brought to this House. And I think it highlights the need for vigilance with respect to the reinsurance pool, but also a commitment from the government to make sure that it is operating effectively. And I'm heartened by the words of the member for Blair, who served with me on that committee, and he has a very strong interest in the Cyclone reinsurance pool. And I'm heartened by his words that the government is backing it in and that we will know more results as to its effectiveness very soon. So I commend the member for Kennedy, the hard-working member for Kennedy, for bringing this important topic to the House. And I also commend the member for Blair, not only for his words today, but also for his work on the committee and the report which I have discussed earlier in my remarks.
And I thank the member for Clare for their contribution. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 6 for a motion in relation to Word Skills Competition 2024.
And I give the call to the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the motion relating to the World Skills Competition 2024 in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
And the member for Newcastle holds the call.
Thank you. Well, I rise to speak to this motion moved in my name, celebrating the exceptional achievements of Australia's skilleroos at the 2024 World Skills Competition in Lyon this September. The World Skills Competition brings together the brightest, most talented young tradespeople from around the globe to showcase their abilities. Whether in construction, engineering, IT or the creative industries, our skilleroos have stood shoulder to shoulder with the world's elite. The competition is fierce, but our team held their own with poise, resilience and a deep sense of pride in representing our country. The talent displayed by the skilleroos, highlighted on the international stage, shows just how important it is to invest in their skills and trades. The skilleroos are both a product and proof positive of the strengths of our vocational education and training sector when properly supported. The Albanese Labor government's commitment to strengthening VET enables our young people to excel. Australia prides itself on being a nation that offers opportunities for all, yet for too long the cost of education has been a barrier for many young people and for those wanting to upskill later in life. TAFE, the backbone of our vocational system, has been a critical pathway for Australians seeking meaningful careers in critical industries like healthcare, construction, aged care, IT and the trades. However, the rising costs of fees have made that pathway out of reach for far too many. The Labor government's fee-free TAFE has already changed the lives of more than 500,000 Australians, providing cost of living relief and a pathway to well-paid, secure employment. Labor has a bill that will now legislate 100,000 free TAFE places each and every year. That's making our free TAFE a permanent feature nationwide in the vet sector. This ongoing investment from the Albanese Labor government will offer greater certainty to students, employers, industry, as well as state and territory governments. We want our TAFE and vet sectors to be able to respond to the challenges and seize the opportunities shaping Australia's society, economy and environment. And that's why Labor is establishing a net zero manufacturing centre of excellence in my electorate at Ties Hill TAFE. This centre will provide high quality and responsive skills training in the clean manufacturing economy, upskilling our workforce so they can take full advantage of the opportunities that renewable manufacturing provides. Newcastle and the Hunter has a proud history of industry and manufacturing, making this the perfect place for a centre of excellence. Our positive vision of TAFE and the vet sector stands in stark contrast to the Coalition's abysmal record. When we came to office, it was clear that we inherited a massive skills challenge from those opposite. In 2022, the OECD reported that Australia had the second highest labour shortage per capita among the OECD countries. Now, with that kind of track record, you'd be thinking that the opposition were keen to make amends, but unfortunately they've refused to back the Albanese Labor government's legislation for free TAFE places. Their own shadow minister has labelled the transformational policy as wasteful spending. Under the leadership of the Albanese Labor government, free TAFE is just one example of how we're putting people first. We believe in a fairer Australia, where everyone has a fair chance to succeed and where opportunity is not determined by the size of your bank account, but rather by your own hard work. Investing in a strong vocational education and training sector enables our apprentices and tradespeople to shine both at home and abroad. Skills drive the future of young people and the future of our nation. This is a belief that the Albanese Labor government and World Skills share. Australia is proud of our skilleroos who represented our world-class vocational training on the global stage. This next generation of skilled Australians is building the Australian of the future. And Deputy Speaker, I must say how delighted the Prime Minister and I were to meet one of the recipients of a medal from that World Skills competition when we launched the Centre of Excellence in Net Zero Manufacturing at Ties Hill TAFE just a couple of weeks ago. That young man was full of pride, so excited about the bright, prosperous future for him and all of his colleagues at TAFE under an Albanese Labor government.
And I thank the member for Newcastle, the Deputy Speaker. Is the motion seconded? Is the motion seconded?
Yes, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
And I thank the member for Cunningham. The question now before the Federation Chamber is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I love vocational education. I can say that because I was a carpenter and joiner and always will be. I was a builder, always will be, before I retrained as a barrister. I remember with some fondness, my apprenticeship. For those who've done an apprenticeship, that would probably bring a smile to most people's face. It is an education. And Peter Marnie, if you're ever watching this or listening to this, thank you for your guidance for nearly 4 years and your, shall we say, instructions. I'm a big fan of vocational education and training. I wouldn't be the person that I am today but for Holmes Glen College of TAFE, and I am a big fan of TAFE. I'm not afraid to say that, but and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Now, I'm really pleased to be able to celebrate the Australian skilleroos who've returned from the 47th World Skills Competition. In September, Australia's best young skilled apprentices and trainees took on 86 other countries competing for the title of the world's most skilled country. We saw trainees and apprentices in carpentry, plumbing, cybersecurity, fashion design, baking and so many other fields, showcasing their expertise and the strength of Australia's vocational training sector. Congratulations to all competitors, coaches and supporters. You did Australia proud. And it's that sector which myself and members on this side of the House have fought for. The Coalition handed the Albanese government a skills and training system not just trending up, but powering ahead, thanks to years of strong economic leadership and future-focused investment. We invested over $13 billion in skills over the final 2 years of government alone, representing the most significant reforms to vocational training in over a decade. Trade apprentices in training hit record highs in the final months of the coalition government, reaching 429,000 apprentices and trainees in training and 277,900 commencements as at June 2022. We were upskilling Australians to meet the challenges and opportunities of the future. But let's take a look at the government's record in comparison. On current measures, we still need 130,000 skilled trade workers to get the construction workforce to where it needs to be. This gap is worsening with a collapse in construction apprenticeship completions by 8.6% and a collapse in commencements of nearly 12%. Since Labor took office, Australia has 85,000 fewer apprentices and trainees. That's a loss of 1 in 5. Almost all the gains the coalition made in building up Australia's skills pipeline have been squandered in just 2.5 years. And now, through the fee-free TAFE policy, Labor are trying to put all their eggs in one basket, directing funds to just one section of the training sector at the expense of the private sector and rejecting the industry-based private training industry just like they did last time. And for what? Labor's own data shows that just 13% of fee-free TAFE students have completed their programs to date. That means that there are just as many people dropping out as there are graduating. Questioning of departmental officials at Senate estimates have also uncovered that there has been no performance review of fee-free TAFE, and one will not be completed until June 2025. This means that Labor is committing to permanently fund a $1.5 billion program without knowing if it's even working effectively. This is just another example of Labor blowing taxpayers' money on policy thought bubbles and avoiding transparencies for their failures. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, just in the final few seconds that I've got to speak, I want to send a big shout out to anybody who is thinking about, as they're finishing school, do I do a trade, do I go to uni? These are really important decisions that you're making right now, but I want you to know that if you do a trade, if you do an Australian trade, you will virtually, I don't want to give an ironclad guarantee, but you will always have work. Australian trades are highly respected around the world. You can work in London, just about in every other country. Our skills, our trades are highly respected and they are well paid. Even better than many people who are coming out of university. So you don't just have to go to university, you can get a trade.
And I thank the member for Fisher. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The World Skills Competition brings together the most talented vocational students and apprentices from across the globe to showcase their skill, precision and passion for their chosen field. 29 young and incredibly talented Australians represented our country in September and competed at World Skills in Lyon, France. Our skilleroos were put through their paces and earned their green and gold through a series of regional competitions and a national championship series. The Illawarra was a standout region with 4 representatives honing their skills on the world stage: Michael Bowen, Joseph Cramp, Ethan Everett and Hannah Gerritsen. First up, Michael Bowen represented Australia in industrial mechanics. Michael's journey into industrial mechanics started at a TAFE Open Day, where the display sparked his curiosity for understanding how things work. He quickly honed his practical skills and deepened his knowledge of mechanical systems through a home-based education which focused on a more hands-on approach to learning. Michael was driven by a passion to not only showcase his skills, but also learn from peers around the world and strengthen his understanding of the field. Our second contestant, Joseph Cramp's journey into construction steelwork was influenced by both his father, who was a mechanic, and his metalwork classes in high school. Encouraged by his TAFE teacher to participate in WorldSkills, Joseph embraced the opportunity, which led to a rapid growth in his skills. He dedicated significant time to training, balancing full-time work with intensive practice sessions. With the guidance and support from his mentors and family, he was able to manage full-time work and the intense training required to compete on the world stage. The next two incredibly talented people not only represented the Illawarra, but also flew the flag proudly for our electorate of Cunningham. Ethan Everett's passion for bricklaying is deeply rooted in his family, with his father serving as a seasoned WorldSkills judge and volunteer. Transitioning from school to an apprenticeship, he found his true calling through hands-on experience, supported by a supportive network of family and his employer. Ethan's dedication to excellence was evident when he secured gold at the national competition. He was mentored by Andrew Hosking, who instilled the philosophy to fight for every single millimetre. And with this philosophy, Ethan obtained a Medallion for Excellence. The Medallion for Excellence is awarded to competitors who achieve scores above a global benchmark, indicating that Ethan's skills are among the best in the world. Ethan aspires to become a WorldSkills ambassador, inspiring young tradespeople to pursue their passions with similar determination to that he has. And certainly, last but not least, Hannah Gerritsen represented us in hairdressing. Hannah developed a passion for hairdressing watching online tutorials, where her very supportive friends and family let her practice the techniques she watched. The unwavering support of her employer, along with her TAFE teacher, Hannah gained greater confidence in her abilities and took the French competition by storm. Despite facing scepticism for choosing an apprenticeship over traditional schooling, Hannah remained focused and improved her abilities, drawing on strength from her parents and industry mentors. She values the deep connections she gets to form with clients, appreciating the trust they place in her craft and the solace they find in her company. Hannah was a cut above the rest and claimed a Medallion for Excellence for her exceptional work during the competition in Lyon. To Michael, Joseph, Ethan and Hannah, congratulations on representing our country and our region so proudly. The success of all of our Skillaroos not only highlights the incredible skill and dedication of these young Australians, but also emphasises the critical importance of vocational education and training in our country. It is through initiatives like these that we have seen the true value of investing in vocational education, ensuring that we have a skilled workforce capable of driving our economy forward. And that's why the Albanese Labor government is committed to supporting TAFE and expanding opportunities for Australians through vocational education. We have already delivered on our commitment of 500,000 fee-free TAFE places, and now a re-elected Albanese Labor government will continue this investment with a further 100,000 fee-free places made available each and every year. By making TAFE more accessible, we are not only supporting individuals, but also addressing critical skills shortages in industries that are vital to Australians' future. Congratulations, Michael, Joseph, Ethan and Hannah.
And I thank the member for Cunningham. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Wannon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. And getting vocational education right is critically important because it can change lives. And I just want to acknowledge some of the young people who, through vocational education, are doing outstanding things and they are being recognised locally. And then what I want to do is talk about an area where, sadly, if we don't see an investment in vocational education, we're going to see medical services across Australia and in particular in southwest Victoria suffer. But first, let's have a look at the positive. Casey Smith, who is an electrotechnology apprentice, was named the Apprentice of the Year at Southwest TAFE's annual Trades Awards night on October 24. And well done, Casey. More than 260 people attended the awards night to acknowledge the outstanding achievements of students across automotive, carpentry, cabinet making, electrical, engineering and plumbing trades. And as I said, Casey was the overall winner, employed by Bega Group Koroit, one of our large dairy manufacturers. Southwest TAFE Chief Executive Officer Mark Fidge said it was so important to recognise the skills of these students in the region. Awards like these highlight the amazing things our trade students and their employers are doing in our own community, he said. Other major award winners included Automotive Apprentice of the Year, Dominic Nucky, so well done to Dominic. The Carpentry Apprentice of the Year went to Lachlan King, well done to Lachlan. And it was fantastic to see also when it came to Fabrication Engineering Apprentice of the Year, went to Barry Powell. Jacob Jones got the Mechanical Engineering Apprentice of the Year, and the Plumbing Apprentice of the Year went to Brad Williams from Southwest Roofing in Warrnambool. So to all those award winners, a huge, huge thank you. Now, that brings me to the next issue, Deputy Speaker, and that is an issue which I have created a petition on, and I will be sending this petition to the Petitions Office. But what it does is recognise, sadly, that if we don't see further vocational funding for dermatology services in regional and rural Australia, then sadly we're going to see services in those areas begin to diminish. Now, WPRS Dermatology in my electorate is one of only 2 accredited dermatology training places in a regional setting. However, the high costs associated with establishing, employing and supporting trainees means that they can no longer privately fund these positions unless there is additional funding provided. Now, the provision of STP funding, which is used to do this, has already improved dermatology services in southwest Victoria. And what WPRS is urging the Minister for Health to do is to formally request the Department direct the Australasian College of Dermatologists to redistribute STP funding to support regional positions in 2025 and beyond. Because without this funding, our regional training positions will be at risk, leading to even longer wait times for patients and jeopardising the overall sustainability of our services, the services that WPRS offers, due to burnout and fatigue experienced by our consultant specialists. So I ask the government to look seriously at this issue, and this petition, which I'll be giving to the Petition Office, is signed by 76 doctors. 76 doctors, as well as in total has 609 signatures on it. So there is full recognition that this is an incredibly important issue, in particular by the medical specialists themselves. And I ask the government, I ask the Minister for Health to please look at this issue, and in particular, say the Australasian College of Dermatologists, you have to redistribute this STP funding in a way that also supports regional positions. We cannot have all our dermatology services in our capital cities. We've got to make sure that they're accessible right across our nation, and in particular in southwest Victoria.
And I thank the member for Wannon. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Pearce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Newcastle for bringing this motion forward and allowing us to acknowledge and honour the remarkable accomplishments of Australia's Skilleroos, who represented our country at the 2024 World Skills Competition in Lyon, France. This prestigious event is not just a competition, it is a showcase of talent, skill and dedication that reflects the very best of what Australia has to offer on the global stage. The Skilleroos, a team of 32 talented young apprentices and trainees, embarked on this journey with passion and commitment. They competed against over 1,500 participants from 75 countries in a variety of fields, including plumbing, carpentry, baking, cybersecurity and fashion design. Their hard work culminated in an impressive performance that saw Australia ranked 14th out of 59 countries, and earning a bronze medallion in welding, along with 14 medallions in excellence. This achievement is a testament not only to their individual talents, but also to the rigorous training and preparation they underwent to reach this level of excellence. The dedication, skill and passion exhibited by our Skillaroos exemplify the high standards of vocational education and training in Australia. These young individuals have shown us that hard work and determination can achieve greatness. Their success at the World Skills Competition highlights the incredible talent within our skilled workforce, talent that is crucial for driving innovation and economic growth in our country. It is essential to recognise that these achievements do not happen in isolation. They are the result of a robust vocational education system that nurtures young talent. The Skillaroos have benefited from quality training programmes that equip them with the skills needed to excel in their respective fields. This is a clear indication of the importance of investing in vocational education as it lays the foundation for future successes. As we celebrate these achievements, we must also commend the Albanese Labour government for its unwavering commitment to improving access to vocational education and training. By prioritising initiatives such as fee-free TAFE, we are ensuring that all Australians have the opportunity to pursue their passions without financial barriers. This initiative is vital for creating a skilled workforce that meets the demands of our evolving economy. The Albanese Labour government's focus on putting TAFE back at the heart of our vocational education system is a step in the right direction. TAFE institutions play a crucial role in providing high-quality training that prepares students for real-world challenges. By supporting these institutions, we are not only investing in individual futures, but also fostering a culture of excellence that benefits our entire community. As we look ahead, it is imperative that we continue to support the government's efforts to invest in our people through training initiatives. The Skillaroos have demonstrated what can be achieved when we harness talent and provide opportunities for growth. It is our responsibility to ensure that future generations have access to similar pathways. We must advocate for ongoing investment in vocational education and training programmes that empower young Australians. By prioritising initiatives like fee-free TAFE, we can create an inclusive environment where everyone has the chance to succeed. This commitment will not only benefit individuals, but will also strengthen our economy by cultivating a skilled workforce ready to meet future challenges. Let us take this moment to celebrate the exceptional achievements of Australia's Skillaroos at the 2024 Work Skills Competition. Their dedication serves as an inspiration to us all, a reminder of what can be accomplished through hard work, through passion and commitment to excellence. Let us also recognise the vital role of vocational education and training in shaping our future. Together we will support initiatives that empower young Australians to pursue their dreams without barriers. By investing in our people today, we are securing a brighter tomorrow for all Australians. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
And I thank the member for Pearce. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's such a privilege to stand in support of this motion from the member for Newcastle to celebrate our awesome Skillaroos. And for me, it's particularly exciting, given that one of the Skillaroos is from my electorate of Corangamite in Victoria. Trey McCauley is a carpenter from Bannockburn, studying at Gordon TAFE. He has amazing talent, and I'm so proud that he had the opportunity to represent our country at the World Skills Games in Lyon, France earlier this year. Trey represented Australia alongside 28 other young Australians at the largest international skills competition in world skills history, with more than 1,400 competitors and 1,300 experts from over 70 countries taking part. Competing to be the best in your field can be stressful, but according to the team at Gordon TAFE, if there's anyone who knows how to keep cool in a high-pressure environment, it's Trey. Trey said in a recent interview, and I quote, Being a volunteer firefighter and serving my community has really shaped me as a person and helped me to be my best while competing at World Skills. The World Skills competition showcases Australian vocational education and training internationally and puts centre stage the government's mission to continue strengthening our world-class vet sector. The Skillaroos are the product, the walking proof of the strengths of our vet sector. They demonstrate the life-changing benefits of TAFE for so many Australians like Trey. And that's why the Albanese government is continuing its investment in the skills that Australia needs to drive economic growth, address workplace shortages and provide pathways for more people to pursue a career as a tradie, as a carer or IT professional. And it's why we've introduced the Free TAFE Bill. The bill will ensure Free TAFE is a national and enduring program. Ongoing Free TAFE will offer greater certainty to students, employers and industry. It's what our communities have been calling for, and it's what the Albanese government is delivering. Free TAFE is targeting sectors that desperately need skilled workers. And it's growing from strength to strength every day, giving young people and those wanting to transition access to new skills and to gain accreditation. Deputy Speaker, fee-free TAFE started in January 2023 and it's exceeded all expectations, with more than 508,000 enrolments, including 131,000 in care, including disability and aged care, 48,900 in digital and tech, 35,000 in construction and 35,500 in early childhood education and care. This is groundbreaking, Deputy Speaker, and the result shows free fee TAFE is particularly benefiting Australians from priority cohorts, with over 170,000 young Australians, 124,000 job seekers and 30,000 First Nations Australians enrolling in the program. And for all free TAFE places, 6 in 10 have been taken up by women, and 1 in 3 are based in regional or remote Australia. Almost 90% of fee-free TAFE courses are full qualifications at the Certificate 3 level and above. These courses take longer to complete, as long as 3 years for full-time study and more for those who elect to study part-time. The Albanese government's 24-25 budget delivers $600 million in measures to bolster skills growth and development in clean energy, industry, construction and manufacturing sectors, as well as supporting apprentices to break down barriers for women in male-dominated industries. This includes $91 million over 5 years in the budget to help skill the new energy workforce to transition to net zero, $90 million over 3 years to help skill the housing and construction workforce, and $55 million over 4 years for building women's career programs, and $265 million over 4 years to target support under the Australian Apprenticeship Incentive Scheme. So, Deputy Speaker, in closing, TAFE serves as a cornerstone of opportunity, a catalyst for personal growth and a foundation for better, brighter futures for so many young Australians right across our nation. Our government recognises this. It's why we're backing free TAFE. And it's why we're backing young aspirational Australians like Trey to be the leaders of our nation's future workforce.
And I thank the member for Corangamite. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 7 for a motion in relation to Services Australia.
And I give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business, the member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to Services Australia in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. And I'm prompted to do this, Mr Deputy Speaker, because last week the member for Maribyrnong, the member for Government Services, delivered a speech which he billed as containing a stocktake of his achievements in the Government Services portfolio. And it turns out that the Minister for Government Services, when he comes to assess his own performance, gives himself a very high mark. He didn't put it in exactly these terms, but certainly when I was at Sydney University, it went from pass to credit to distinction to high distinction. I think it's pretty clear that the Minister for Government Services regards himself as being worthy of a high distinction. He had this to say, quotes, "When I took over the portfolio, it was obvious that staffing cuts, thousands of jobs being abolished, had left the agency unable to meet customer expectations," close quotes. By the way, he was referring to those dreadful Liberals who'd done this. And he says further, quote, "I fought very hard to get Services Australia properly resourced and was able to secure record funding in this year's budget," close quotes. This is the basis on which it seems he would award himself very high marks. But I think it's worth, Deputy Speaker, taking a look at the facts, because the facts are rather different to the construction, the revisionist construction, which the Minister has put on what occurred. If you look at what happened in the May 2023 budget, when the Minister for Government Services was on the job, the resourcing to Services Australia wasn't increased, it was reduced. It was reduced to $8.593 billion. And the average staffing level was cut, not increased, but cut to 26,692. Now, we all know that the member for Maribyrnong likes to put the best possible construction on things, and you'd be naive to take what he said at face value. But I have to say, this is a particularly remarkable exercise in rewriting history. Because the simple fact is that under the member for Maribyrnong, the performance of Services Australia has gone backwards, and the reason is that the member for Maribyrnong has been applying the wrong policy tools. Now, in the period from in 2021-22, when those dreadful Liberals, to use his language, when we were in government, it took on average 35 days to process a claim for an age pension. 35 days. For the period 1 January 2024 to 1 May 2024, the average time was 84 days. So processing time gone from 35 days to 84 days. Gone from reasonable to terrible. Now, at the same time, we saw a change in the number of people sitting in the customer delivery group from 20,902 to 23,324. So the number of people in the customer delivery service delivery group went up. The actual quality of the customer service delivery went through the floor. Now, I've heard a range of excuses from the Minister over the last couple of years. There's been an argument that we've seen an increase in customer demand. Not true. Customer demand in 21-22, 126 million. Customer demand in 23-24, 92 million. 126 million to 92 million. So demand dropped. The number of claims that were made, 21-22, 517 million. 23-24, 468 million. So let's be clear, number of claims dropped, and yet processing time got worse. Under the Coalition, Services Australia had a smaller headcount, it had more claims to deal with, it faced higher customer demand, and it delivered better outcomes. Under the member for Maribyrnong, the number of staff has blown out remarkably, and yet the service performance has gone through the floor. What is the member for Maribyrnong's solution? It's to splurge yet more money. $1.8 billion now committed for an extra 7,500 public servants. Well, we've seen the trend. More public servants means services reducing. On that trend, if that continues, then these 7,500 additional public servants will not make things better, but worse. Frankly, the member for Maribyrnong has done a truly dismal job, and critically, trying to run Services Australia in the 21st century, he's been using discredited 19th century approaches. He wants to throw more staff at the problem. What he needs to do, amongst other things, is do a much better job on the digital service delivery. Service New South Wales under the Coalition government showed the way. This minister has not been listening. Australians deserve better. The member for Maribyrnong has given himself a very high mark. Most objective observers would disagree very strongly.
And I thank the Manager of Opposition Business, the member for Bradfield. Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
And I thank the member for Sturt. The question before the Federation Chamber now is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I acknowledge that the member for Bradfield is raising his concerns on behalf of those in our communities who use Services Australia, but he has completely failed to acknowledge the dedication, commitment and hard work that our frontline Services Australian workers put in each and every day. This motion also highlights an underlying disrespect that many in the Coalition have for public servants who are our frontline service workers. Deputy Speaker, Services Australia is home to some of the most dedicated and compassionate workers across our nation. And after a decade of neglect, the Albanese Labor government is working hard to once again empower Australia's most vulnerable and give them access to the services they deserve. Under the Albanese government, we are reducing wait times and we're investing $1.8 billion into Services Australia. And we're doing this because under the Coalition, vulnerable people were often waiting far too long, often anxious and frustrated, and for good reason. Now, the facts do speak for themselves, Deputy Speaker. Between 2015 to 2022, the former Coalition government ripped 3,800 frontline workers' staff out of Services Australia and the department. This coincided with their cruel and illegal robo-debt scheme. And we know they were also planning to cut another 2,700 staff between 2021 and 2023. And the now opposition wants to cut jobs further and services even further, with 36,000 job cuts, around 20% of the public service. So what does this mean? Australians would be forced to wait longer for their pension, paid parental leave, childcare subsidies, Medicare and processing of veterans' claims, reversing the improvements Australians have seen as a result of our government's investments. In contrast, the Coalition in government would continue to spend big on consultants, in the end costing the taxpayer more. And Deputy Speaker, the last time they did this, it led to backlogs across Services Australia, veterans' claims, visa processing and passport processing. The Albanese government is taking a different approach. In the most recent budget, the Albanese government invested $1.8 billion into Services Australia to maintain a customer service workforce and to deliver timely services and payments to Australians who are doing it tough with the cost of living. This is really important work, and to make this a reality, there will be an additional 4,030 staff next financial year and more than 3,500 extra staff in 2025 to 26. The additional staff will better position the agency to meet government and community expectations of timely service delivery. And this follows the investment in November 23, when in a record 10 weeks, 3,000 additional frontline staff were onboarded into the agency and trained to accelerate claims, processing times and improve access for customers. It was amazing, cutting the backlog of nearly 1 million Centrelink and Medicare claims to usual levels by mid-financial year, which helped to bring down call wait times and congestion messages towards the most recent financial year. And during the first quarter of 24 to 25, the agency finalised almost 124 million claims, exceeding our target. And compared to this time last year, processing times have reduced for aged care claims by 32 days, the childcare subsidy by 16 days, disability support pension claims by 24 days, Medicare eligibility and enrolment by 41 days, and pharmaceutical benefit scheme patient refunds by 81 days. This work changes lives. We know that reducing outstanding claims is helping to bring down call wait times as fewer people contact the agency regarding the process of their claim. We've also seen call wait times improve by more than 17 minutes for Medicare customers and 10 minutes for Centrelink customers. Additionally, most customers are being served within 15 minutes at 318 service centres across Australia. So, Deputy Speaker, it's clear the Albanese government is investing in the right areas. We're backing in Services Australia, we're funding more staff for Services Australia, particularly in regional areas, and we're cutting wait times so that Australians can access the services they need and deserve. Thank you.
And I thank the member for Corangamite. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Bradfield for bringing this important issue before the chamber by way of this motion. And like any member of Parliament here in the room, we obviously deal with a copious number of constituents that have issues accessing the government services that they are duly entitled to, and certainly matters regarding Services Australia are one of the higher volume of cases that come through my office, and I'm sure most people are quite similar to that. And the member for Bradfield outlined some very concerning statistics around the performance of the processing of claims for or within Services Australia, comparing the last year of our coalition government with the most recent year under the new Labor government. And unfortunately, all the numbers are going the wrong way. The staffing's up, the efficiency of processing's down, and of course people that are entitled to their due support from their government aren't getting it because they're waiting far too long. And I have to say that in the recent budget we saw a dramatic increase in the size of the public service, 36,000 more public servants being employed under this government compared to the last year under the coalition. And we're certainly not getting 36,000 people's worth of efficiency at Services Australia, that's for sure. And it's really galling to people that are wanting the efficient delivery of government services, those that are waiting for their duly entitled claims to be processed, and frankly any taxpayer that wants us to have an efficient system that gives people the support that they deserve, that processes it in a timely manner and makes sure that government can be as efficient as possible. Now, the new government are bragging about increasing the number of people being employed at Services Australia, and I don't know if that's something to be proud of if the performance is commensurately deteriorating at the same time. And as the member for Bradfield pointed out, whilst the size of the workforce has gone up by a couple of thousand, the efficiency in processing and the outcomes for the people that matter when it comes to engaging government resources, the people that are entitled to it, are missing out. They're going backwards. So something is really wrong when more people are achieving poorer outcomes in processing those claims. And the member for Bradfield is quite right. There are good ways and bad ways to increase the resources that go towards government services delivery, particularly at Services Australia. And I agree with him that commending the former coalition government in New South Wales and the way in which they engaged in digital service delivery and created dramatic efficiencies across a number of government services deliveries through their digital government agenda is a model that is very worthy of reflecting upon, and one that would be good for our Commonwealth government to look at ways of investing in, so that people have the best modern experience when it comes to their interaction with government. Now, we all deal with individual cases that can be quite complex with Services Australia, with immigration matters, with NDIS, etc. And there's always it's always very reasonable to respect and understand that there will be at times quite complex matters that need bespoke service delivery, and might have a complexity that means it's not that easy to quickly and rapidly process. But the vast majority should sit within an efficient framework, and should indeed be something that is achieving reduced wait times through the performance metrics, particularly as investment in the processing of these claims goes up, not going backwards like we are right now. And that means that the policy decisions that this government are making are an embarrassment, an absolute embarrassment to what they could be and should be achieving for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. So swallow the pride, admit you've got it wrong, and look for opportunities to change course and see a focus on policy delivery in Services Australia that is actually going to deliver for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Because right now, they're being let down by the performance of this government. and they're the ones that need good government more than anyone at all, and instead they're getting these terrible outcomes from Services Australia, and we'd like to see the government dramatically improve their performance in this amongst many other areas.
And I thank the member for Sturt. The question before the Federation Chamber is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I've just got to say that for those opposite, and for this particular Shadow Minister, the member for Bradfield, to bring forward this motion is just absolutely unbelievable. And to hear the former Speaker, the member for Sturt, talking about, Australians who are accessing Services Australia being let down by this government, it just beggars belief that these people would say things like that when they are the party of robo-debt, the party of Centrelink closures, the party that took the human out of human services, the party that gave us, great lines like lifters, not leaners, and the disaster budget of 2014, which attempted to absolutely rip the guts out of our social security system and left, if a lot of those things had got through, would have left people in such a dire state, because this is a party, those opposite, that do not value these things whatsoever. This is a party that has the temerity to come into this House and criticise this government for how Services Australia is run, when since our election in 2022, what we have been trying to do is rebuild Services Australia into an organisation that is fit to actually deliver the services that Australians need. And we have been doing that work, led by the Minister, Bill Shorten, who came in after, it is left after a decade of mismanagement, left in ruins by the Coalition. The mover of this motion, the member for Bradfield, actually had to give evidence to a royal commission about the mismanagement of the human services under his and his colleagues' watch. In her report, the Commissioner relayed the human consequences of that neglect. Families struggling to make ends meet receiving debt notices on Christmas. Young people being driven to despair by demands for payments by private debt collectors, and even the tragic suicides of Australians who had false Centrelink debts raised against them. This track record was known early. In 2017, people began raising the alarm, and the response of those opposite was to double down and go on the attack against people who complained. They cried righteous indignation against what they saw as the undeserving ripping off of taxpayers. But as we know, these debts were not only incorrect, they were punitive, and the ferocity with which the Liberal government went after vulnerable Australians serves only as a lesson to never trust these people with the social security system, because, as I said, they do not believe in it, they do not recognise its value, and they will only strive to cut it and to undermine the people that access it. What they did through robo-debt was not only immoral, not only heartless, it was also illegal. And they want to come in here and criticise us with that track record is unbelievable. As I said, our government has been rebuilding Services Australia and trying to restore trust with the Australians who access it. And make no mistake, if those opposite were to get back into government, they would undo all that work, because the fundamentals of their beliefs remain the same. And we've just heard from the member for Sturt how terrible it is that we've actually increased staff, that we've actually employed more people at Services Australia to deliver those services. That's what these people think is a problem, when you've got more public servants delivering services to the public. They despise our social safety net and those who rely on it. Whether it's Medicare or social security payments, it doesn't matter. You can be sure that they're out to gut the services Australians hold dear. So what is our track record, Deputy Speaker? Since coming to government, we have cleared the extensive backlog of claims. In this year's budget, we invested $1.8 billion into Services Australia. And last year, we employed 3,000 additional frontline staff to accelerate claims processing times and improve access for customers. That's right. Unlike the member for Sturt, I'm proud that we've increased staff at Services Australia, that hard-working public servants are getting the resources they need to actually support people to access the social security system. In the first quarter of this year, Services Australia finalised almost 124 million claims, with over 90% processed within standard timeframes, which exceeded our targets. The average processing times for the age pension was reduced by 32 days. a reduction of 32 days. For the childcare subsidy, it was being reduced by 16 days to an average of 8 days to process claims. And for the disability support pension, claims now take on average 24 days less than they did under the previous government. And I could go on, Deputy Speaker, because across a range of different payments, we have cut those processing times because we are rebuilding Services Australia that they destroyed with 10 years of neglect.
Expired. I thank the member for Canberra. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this motion brought by the member for Bradfield, and I thank him for doing so. I note that he is absolutely committed to a better system of service for Service Australia. And I was here for the tail end of the member for Canberra's speech, and I have tremendous respect for the honourable member for Canberra, but with all respect to her, I think she has failed to understand the nature of the motion that has been put by the member for Bradfield and also the supporting statement given by the member for Sturt. It is not the fact that we are objecting to the number of public servants that are now employed by Services Australia. We are saying, what are these public servants doing? Because by their own admissions, this Albanese Labor government has vastly increased the number of public servants in this place, around 36,000, and yet this is what we see. We are not seeing the service delivery for those public servants that have been employed. So we have no objection to there being more public servants, but public servants are here to deliver services at the end of the day. They're not here just to collect a wage, and they are largely unproductive. And the very large increase in the number of public servants, Deputy Speaker, has of course led to the inefficiencies, the government waste, the massive overspend by this government, which still fuels the inflation and fuels our cost of living crisis. So I just say to the member for Canberra, I note that she has now left the chamber, but I say to the member for Canberra, well, of course we know that public departments run on public servants. I was a public servant, Deputy Speaker. I've got tremendous respect for public servants, but why is it that they are employing more and more public servants and they're not delivering the services? Because what we have seen in the Service Australia's last annual report, the 2023-2024 report to which my friend, the member for Bradfield, refers in his motion, customer satisfaction, 79 out of 100 against a target of 85. So that's a failure. Only 55.2% of customers were served within 15 minutes against a target of 70%. The percentage of work processed within timeliness standards was 71.8% against a target of 90%. And finally, only 50.5% of Centrelink claims were processed within their respective timeliness standards. So, Deputy Speaker, this is the issue that is being raised by the member for Bradfield, and this is the issue that we are speaking about. And we can see that wherever these public servants have been employed, they are not being employed at the coalface to actually deliver results. And at the end of the day, that is what the public service is there to do. So, Deputy Speaker, I see this and hear this every single day from my electorate. I hear people that have been on the phone for Centrelink. They are frustrated. They're calling my office in tears. They can't get into their MyGov app, for example, or they are people that cannot use technology for whatever reason. They are vision impaired. They may be slightly intellectually disabled, or for whatever reason, they are then left with a phone that remains unanswered. And this is causing tremendous stress to people who are already, if they are accessing these levels of government services, Deputy Speaker. Yeah, I hear the interjections. I'll be very interested to hear how on earth the honourable member proposes to defend this very damning report that has been handed down. Well, in my electorate, this is what they're telling me, and I would bet almost my last dollar that they are saying it the same thing in your electorate. It's the same in Lyons. It's the same across the country. This government No, I'm not saying that people should use the internet. I'm saying...
Order. This is not the place for a conversation between two honourable members. And if you'd please direct your comments through the chair.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, in the interest of clarity for those that have not understood what I think I've put as a very simple proposition, is there has been a great increase in the number of public servants that are working in this department, but there has not been the corresponding level of service delivery. People in my electorate say to me they can't use MyGov, nobody answers the phone, and the figures in this survey bear this out. This government has failed on government services. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
And I thank you, the member for Hughes. A reminder that the question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Bean.
Deputy Speaker, it beggars belief that the party of Robodebt would trot out this nonsense. I mean, customer experience indeed. This motion and the speeches in favour of it underscore the approach the Liberals have to the Australian public service and the people who work for critical organisations such as Services Australia. The electorate of Bean, which includes Tuggeranong, Molonglo Valley, parts of Woden and the ACT, which I have the honour to represent in this place, is home to thousands of the staff of Services Australia, the very people caught up in the crosshairs of this motion. Services Australia employs over 4,300 people in the ACT, with several workplaces in the electorate of Bean, including the Reece Street offices, the Caroline Chisholm Centre and the Louisa Lawson building. I know and talk to hundreds of Services Australia employees. I and all my Labor colleagues understand and value the contribution they are making to this nation every day. This motion and the rhetoric surrounding it from the members opposite exhibits the negativity and contempt for the staff of this agency. Deputy Speaker, in prosecuting this motion, the Liberals choose to cherry-pick data and make out that Services Australia has somehow collapsed after the Liberals left office. What nonsense. They choose to only cite data they believe makes the case that Services Australia and the people who work there are failing. And the reason for this is they want to take political points off this government and score cheap points at the expense of hard-working public servants. They ignore the reality of what is happening. They ignore the real figures that don't suit their political conspiracy. But thankfully, my colleague, the member for Canberra, corrected the record. But all this beating up on the APS underscores one thing we know to be true about the Liberals. If the Liberals do ever get the chance to be in office again, they will rip into the APS and into Services Australia again, like every time they are in government. And we know the consequences of that. This motion today is the entree. It sets a tone that will justify cuts and contracting out. If the Liberals get back into office, the nation will suffer again at the hands of a political party that to its core disrespects public servants and wants to talk them down at every turn. When they get into power, they always turn this attitude into cuts. And Deputy Speaker, I hope that as many residents of Bean as possible are listening to this debate. I'll certainly be bringing it to the attention of my community because it gives a real insight into what the Liberals think they will do if they get back into office. It'll be bad news for Australia and bad news for the workers at Services Australia, many of whom live in my electorate of Bean. In this debate, my colleagues have been addressing the many myths in this motion about service delivery at Services Australia. But as the member for Bean, I'll focus on what the Liberals will do to jobs here in this nation's capital and right across the nation. The Liberals want to cut jobs and services in every state and territory while spending billions on more expensive consultants and contractors. We've seen this movie before. Under the Liberals' jobs cuts, Australians in need will be forced to wait longer for their pension, paid parental leave, childcare subsidies, Medicare and veterans' claims to be processed, reversing the improvements Australians have seen as a result of Labor's investments. Liberals' use of consultants and contractors comes at a costly premium without offering the value for money that taxpayers expect. And what does it lead to? It leads to robo-debt and backlogs across Services Australia, veterans' claims, visa processing and passport processing, all the issues that we have had to clean up in this term of government. So, Deputy Speaker, in a nutshell, what what does the Liberal Party want to do if they return to government, and what will they do to the actual job of government? Well, they want to cut 36,000 jobs, which would work out to be around 20% of the APS. And what might that look like? Well, it will probably look like 4,000 jobs in Services Australia, delaying payments and call wait times increasing. You'd be looking at 1,000 jobs in DVA, leaving veterans without the support they deserve. We could be looking at 4,000 jobs across Defence, Home Affairs and the AFP, threatening Australia's national security, secure borders and the delivery of AUKUS. And yet, what we're doing instead is working for Australians looking for employment, not against them, like those opposite want to do with our public service. If ever these plans are implemented, it will decimate both the services delivered for and the employment opportunities in the electorate of being. And Deputy Speaker, I'll continue to work hard for those who turn up every day for public service.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Casey.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this is an important motion because, as we all know, when we talk about Services Australia, what we're actually talking about is the Australian people and those that need access to funds, whether it's disability support pensions, whether it's a low-income card, whether it's the age pension. These are Australia's most vulnerable needing support. I'm sure every member in this House and many senators, I got one today actually, Deputy Speaker, an email from a constituent who'd been trying to call Centrelink and hadn't been able to get through and reached out to my office wanting support because they've been unable to get that support they need. Australians at their most vulnerable are looking to the government, are looking for support. And let's understand, like many things with the Albanese Labor government, what did they say before the election versus the reality of today? Let's have a look at what the then opposition leader and the then shadow minister said, and I quote, "They will restore dignity, humanity and competence to the delivery of government services." So that's what they claimed 2.5 years ago. Well, we're now into a good chunk of the Albanese Labor government, so we can compare some data on what they said to what they do. And let's compare to the former coalition government. Let's look at something like disability support pension payments, and they were taking an average of 40 days to process under the coalition. Now, under Labor, that has more than doubled to 93 days. Let's look at the age pension. Under the coalition, 35 days. Now under Labor, 76 days. Let's look at the low-income card. Under the coalition, 16 days. Now under Labor, 53 days of a wait period. And the average speed to answer Centrelink calls, based on the data, the department's own data, is now at over 30 minutes. So you've now got to wait 30 minutes to receive a call, to have your call answered if you're lucky enough to get it answered under this government. Now compare that to the 14-minute wait under the coalition, and that's why those opposite are so frustrated and needing to interject to previous speakers, Deputy Speaker, because they know that the statistics and the data from the department don't match the reality for the Australian people. Let's look at customer satisfaction in the 23-24 year. The target 85 out of 100, they hit 79.1 out of 100. Customers served within 15 minutes, the target 70%. Under this government, it hit 55.2%. Now, work processed within the timeliness standards. It's very important, as we know, that those that are most vulnerable get looked after in a timely way. The standard is 90%. Under this government, 71.8%. And the official data confirms that only 58% of Centrelink claims were processed within their respective timeliness standards, and that's including things like the age pension, the disability support pension and the low-income card. And this is why we're seeing the challenges that the Australian people are facing, whether it's cost of living, where we have the Treasurer stand up day after day in question time and tell the Australian people that they've never had it better when they're struggling more than ever, Whether it is roads, where they're saying we're investing billions in roads and every Victorian who drives a road, particularly a regional and rural road, in my community, in many communities, knows there are potholes everywhere, or whether it's Services Australia, where the government promised to restore dignity, humanity and competence to the delivery of government services, a nice line that they haven't delivered on based on their own data in the Services Australia 23-24 annual report. And that sums up, Deputy Speaker, the Albanese Labor government in the 2.5 years of this government. The Prime Minister, when he was opposition leader, promised the world to the Australian people. He promised that he could solve the challenges that they faced around cost of living, around Services Australia. He made it sound so easy. Well, the Prime Minister made many promises that he has not delivered on, and 2.5 years into the Albanese Labor government, Australians know they're worse off. They know they'll be worse off into the future. They know that this is a Prime Minister that is weak and will not deliver for the Australian people.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker, and I think it's fairly telling that the previous Speaker acknowledged the need to restore dignity and competence to Services Australia, which is a pretty damning indictment, I think, on the record on the decade before the Albanese Labor government was elected. So let's get something straight. We know that the previous government treated those who were accessing Service Australia services with absolute contempt. This is, after all, the government that presided over the abhorrent robo-debt fiasco, which ruined people's lives. This is a government that absolutely gutted the public sector. So please forgive me, Deputy Speaker, if I greet this motion to walk before the House today with some cynicism. I do not believe for a second that there is a genuine shred of concern for people who have had to access Services Australia, and this is rather just another tactic being used by those opposite to attack the record of the government rather than work together with the government to deal with cost of living pressures that people are experiencing and making sure that people are not left behind. Of course, we know that people are doing it tough, and we've consistently acknowledged that and are working hard every single day to improve the lives of Australians in every community across the country, including my own in Chisholm. And indeed, in the 2024-25 budget, our government invested $1.8 billion into Services Australia over 3 financial years to maintain a customer service workforce, to deliver timely services and payments to Australians experiencing vulnerability in the midst of cost of living pressures, to sustain emergency response capability and to support other aspects of the agency's operations. And we know that this investment is improving claim processing times and helping decrease call wait times for customers. This is really important. It's not about numbers on a page. I know everyone's been quite focused on a lot of data in this conversation, but I think it's really important that we don't divorce the data from people's lives and experiences, and that we acknowledge the real stress and distress that people experience when they're hoping to get in contact with Services Australia to support them through what is often a very difficult time in their lives. And it's because we understand that those very real pressures that people face and that very real stress people face, that we have committed to putting an additional 4,030 staff on in the next financial year, and in the subsequent financial year, 3,530 staff. And this is because we want people to be able to get the help that they need when they need it. This will help the agency to meet government and community expectations of timely service delivery. This follows investments from November last year, when in a record 10 weeks, 3,000 additional frontline staff were progressively onboarded into the agency and trained to accelerate claims, processing times and improve access for customers. And we know that the agency's now reduced claims volumes down to usual levels. We've reduced a backlog of nearly 1 million Centrelink and Medicare claims to usual levels. That has helped to bring down call wait times and congestion messages towards the end of last year. We absolutely know that we need to do all we can to reduce processing times and to treat people with the respect, compassion that they deserve. Reducing the outstanding claims we know is helping to bring down call wait times, as fewer people will need to contact the agency regarding the progress of their claim. And we know that we've seen improvements in terms of wait times for Medicare customers and for Centrelink customers. Our significant investment in staffing came at a really critical time when Services Australia had fewer public servants per capita than ever before, because we know the previous government ripped out thousands and thousands of frontline staff out of Services Australia and its predecessor department, and that was an absolute shame. And we know that this coincided with the horrific, cruel and illegal robo-debt scheme. So our work in government has been about focusing on improving the capacity of Services Australia and making sure that our offices and staff are located in major cities across the country where people need to access them. I really am disappointed that the opposition haven't worked more closely with our government to improve this situation. I hope they do in the future. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, order of the day number 1, resumption of debate on the motion moved by the member for Hawke.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we know that currently people are doing it tough out there, and we know that one of the hardest things that they face is the prices at supermarkets. When you're on a very low wage or on a pension, every single cent counts. And every time there's an increase at the supermarket, the person that feels it the most is that low-income earner or that pensioner. And that's why I'm very pleased that the current government is doing all that it can to alleviate the cost of living problems. And one of those areas is looking at supermarkets and how they conduct themselves and what their way of selling is affecting, or how is it affecting the cost of supermarket prices. And the government's going to provide $30 million, Deputy Speaker, in a package to be able to, in additional funding for the ACCC, to crack down on misleading pricing and practices, and of course, very importantly, poor conduct from different outlets. Deputy Speaker, we need to do more in this area. We need to ensure that the Australian consumer is getting a fair go when they walk into the supermarket. And during the ACCC inquiry, we saw examples where they're all over our TV, where, for example, some of these big supermarket outlets, and there's only 2 of them really, the 2 that dominate the market here in Australia, where they would have specials and sales with bells and whistles, only to show that those sales and special prices were actually higher than what the normal price is. That is absolute misconduct on behalf of supermarkets, conning the Australian public, and it's not on. And this is where the ACCC has to crack down on them and ensure that they're doing the right thing by Australia. Now, we know that every piece of retail that's sold in this country, across the nation, is out of 2 outlets. Around 70% when you include not just the supermarkets, when you include the servos, the liquor stores that are owned by these particular conglomerates. 70% of retail being sold in this nation comes from those 2. In no other country around the world would they be allowed to operate. They would be broken down and sold off, and rightly so. And it's unfortunate that we don't have laws in this country that will actually do that. In the United States, it's over 40%. The government will step in and break you up and make you divest. And the reality is we've allowed these oligarchs to get away with it for so long, Deputy Speaker. And I'm pleased that the government is now doing something, that there's going to be a crackdown from the ACCC to investigate the allegations, to ensure that Australian consumer is getting a fair go, and especially in an economic climate as the current economic climate, where every cent counts, especially for those low-income workers, for our pensioners, and for people that are doing it really, really tough. Deputy Speaker, these reforms will make the system faster, stronger, simpler and more targeted and more transparent. And it's also about more competition for consumers and more certainty and clarity for businesses. Deputy Speaker, under this new system, we'll set clear thresholds to determine whether a merger needs ACCC approval, and there are also powers to ensure all the high-risk mergers are looked at. Deputy Speaker, we know that currently, when you look at the price increases and what's been happening, a survey of 2,500 households in July 2024 showed Australian households spend around $168 per week on groceries. This equates to almost $728 per month, or $8,700 per year. The average weekly spending for larger households of 5 or more people is roughly $232, with the majority of this spent on staple or everyday food items. Now, when we talk about staple and everyday food items, these are necessities. This isn't a luxury. This is about putting food on the table for your kids, for your family, and ensuring that you have the nutrition that's needed. So, Deputy Speaker, we need to ensure that there's a price monitoring, that we look at prices continuously. Where we see something that perhaps doesn't seem quite right, the ACCC has the powers to go in, investigate and take action to ensure that we're able to keep prices down and to ensure that there's fair competition and that these big companies are doing the right thing by the consumer. Deputy Speaker, the biggest increases in price of food items recorded was for oils and fats, 50%. 50% up over the last few years period. Fruit and vegetables over 30%. Bread by 30%.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Australians have been taken for a ride by the major supermarkets, and frankly, it's no wonder they are among Australia's least trusted companies. Coles and Woolworths, who collectively control 2/3 of the grocery sector, are among the most profitable supermarkets in the world. While families have been struggling to balance the household budget, both Coles and Woolies both made more than $1 billion in after-tax profits in the previous financial year. Just swallow that fact. To rub salt into the wounds, it seems like not a day passes without another story in the media about fake discounts, price gouging or mistreatment of small-scale suppliers and farmers. For example, in my electorate of Indi in north-east Victoria, fruit growers are a key part of the local agricultural sector. However, fruit growers Victoria have told government inquiries of the significant market failure in the provision of fresh fruit for the Australian retail sector. And they blame this in large part on the enormous power imbalance of a sector dominated by, guess who, Coles and Woolworths, the duopoly. They worry for the future of Australian-grown fruit. Sadly, this is a common view across most agricultural sectors in this country. For most Australians, the equation is simple. Farmers are getting paid less and consumers are paying more. And it's not hard to understand that that's not right. It's why Australians have had enough of the big supermarket duopoly. And that's why I've supported the government's actions to date to rein in the supermarkets, as well as other big businesses treating regular Australians with contempt. I support inquiries into supermarket price gouging, and I commend efforts to crack down on dodgy specials and fake discounts. I recognise the vital role of the competition regulator in holding Coles and Woolworths accountable and protecting Australian consumers. I also support plans to make the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct mandatory, and I want to see stronger protections, including whistleblower protections for suppliers who call out the big supermarkets on their bad behaviour. I also support calls for an economy-wide divestiture power that would give the competition regulator the power to break up big businesses when it can prove regular Australians are getting a dud deal. Corporate interests should never be prioritised over consumer interests in a sector as important as fundamental food and groceries. However, Deputy Speaker, the major parties are not blameless here. To me, their bold words ring hollow and come far too late. We only find ourselves in this situation because neither the Labor Party nor the Liberal Party nor the National Party have been brave enough to take on the supermarket duopoly. One duopoly in this country seems to be protecting another. For decades, they've sat by and allowed the major supermarkets to accumulate power and influence. And now, in many regional communities, Woolies or a Coles is the only game in town. What I also can't stand is that the supermarket duopoly use their power and influence to squeeze Aussie farmers and agricultural communities. For most primary producers, whether in my electorate of Indi or right across regional Australia, it's getting harder and harder to do business without being dependent on and beholden to the market dominance of the major supermarkets. Yet for years, as political tides have ebbed and flowed, little has been done to fundamentally reform the supermarket sector. And to find ourselves in the situation we're in today is not really a surprise to those who have been watching. It's only once the conduct of the supermarkets became so egregious and so obvious that it could no longer be ignored that both major parties decided to get tough on the supermarkets. So we cannot let this moment go to waste, and we must reform the grocery sector to ensure consumers and farmers are put before corporate profits. As a regional independent, I will always put the interests of my community first, whether that be for a family trying to put affordable food on the table or for the multi-generational farming family underpinning the food security of our nation. I will always push for a fairer food system in this country, where farmers and all our incredible primary producers are rewarded for their hard work, where agricultural communities are supported, not undermined. I will always push for a grocery sector where households, all households, can put food on the table that is healthy, that is affordable. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise in support of this motion from my good friend, the member of Hawke. The number one priority for the Albanese Labor government is cost of living relief. Supermarkets are a place where Australians have been feeling the squeeze every week. Supermarkets are seriously greedy. They are squeezing at both ends of the production line, squeezing consumers at the till and squeezing suppliers at the farm gate and at the factory. Enough is enough. The supermarket squeeze has gone on for too long. In the Hunter, we are proud of agricultural produce and our hard-working families. People across our electorate are feeling the supermarket squeeze as both consumers and producers. Families in our electorate shouldn't have to worry about whether they can afford the groceries they need. Our local farmers and other suppliers shouldn't be screwed over by unfair market practice that diminish their livelihoods. Firstly, let's talk about the consumers. A trip down to the shop shouldn't be a stressful experience, worrying about how much things are going to cost. We are taking action to help consumers get lower prices on their groceries. It's about fairness, transparency and ensuring that every Australian has access to affordable supermarket goods so they can provide for themselves and for their family without being ripped off at the checkout, Deputy Speaker. Our approach to taking on the supermarkets is based on issues that the ACCC has identified. Take land banking, where Coles and Woolies hold on to land to stop smaller supermarkets from getting a foothold, when they lock out smaller retailers, which strangles out competition. It's a bad deal for consumers and a bad deal for suppliers. It needs to stop, Speaker. There's also shrinkflation, which is something that I don't usually see too much of within myself, where a product gets smaller but prices remain the same or even increase. This juices up profits of big companies at the expense of consumers. There are few things worse than going to the shops, buying a product that you love and then finding out not only is it more expensive, but on top of that it's smaller than it was before. It's a bloody rip-off, Speaker. Secondly, there's a squeeze on suppliers. The Food and Grocery Code of Conduct is an important weapon in our fight against the squeeze. This code was once voluntary, but this government has made it mandatory. What we need now is better enforcement. This code is a game changer for suppliers who have been bullied by supermarkets for far too long. By enforcing this code, we can ensure that suppliers are treated fairly and that they can negotiate with the big supermarkets for a more equal position. But the big supermarkets have such a stranglehold on the industry that for many consumers, there isn't any local alternative to Coles or Woolies And as a supplier, if you ditch the big supermarkets, there might be no one else to sell your product to. We're revitalising the national code, the national competition policy to address this. A competitive market is the backbone of a healthy economy. By encouraging competition, we stimulate innovation, improve efficiency and ultimately provide consumers with more choices at a lower price and suppliers with more retailers to work with. Australians are sick and tired of the misconduct of the big supermarkets. They're sick of getting ripped off. Supermarket misconduct is destroying small business suppliers and adding to the cost of living. To combat this, we are providing $30 million of additional funding to the ACCC to crack down on this rort. We are backing the ACCC to more effectively monitor, investigate and penalise, ensuring that big supermarkets are held accountable for their actions. In addition, we are funding the consumer organisation Choice over 3 years to report on supermarket prices across Australia. Access to reliable information about pricing empowers Aussies to make an informed decision, creating a market where fair pricing is rewarded and unethical practices are exposed. The government's #1 priority is tackling the cost of living pressures facing hard-working Aussies all around Australia. Part of this is ensuring that people are paying a fair price at the checkout and that Australian producers are getting a fair price for their work. This motion embodies our commitment to fairness, transparency and well-being for all Australians. We are addressing this immediate need to lower supermarket prices, living while laying the groundwork for a more equitable and competitive economy for the long term. We are standing up to the big supermarkets. Enough is enough. We'll stop this supermarket squeeze. And to Coles and Woolies out there, I plead you, look after your customers. Stop screwing over your suppliers and just do the right thing and be a good Aussie, like good Aussies want you to do. Please look after us. Cheers.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Kennedy.
Madam Speaker, Woolworths and Coles had 51% of the market in 1991. By the year 2000, in 10 years' time, they had 70% of the market, 68% if you listen to the government, 72% if Grocery World A&OP figures. So let's say definitely 70%. So they've gone from 51% to 70%. Now, no one would deny that their market share has gone up from that 70%. And when they did the report on Woolworths and Coles, the 14th report on Woolworths and Coles, they do one every year on average. There have been 15 reports on Woolworths and Coles in 15 years. But the latest one, two blokes got dressed up in pig suits and it terrified them. Within 3 hours or 4 hours, 403 items in Woolworths had been pulled down, and that night the CEO was sacked. Two blokes get dressed up in pig suits. Every political party in this place, all 7 of them, are all moving legislation. Why? Because two blokes got dressed up in a pig suit. Well, it's a pity we didn't do it sooner. But I'm sick of bringing fruit in here all the time and giving the prices. But it just so happened we had an avocado in our office, so I picked up the avocado. Farm gate price, $3. Supermarket price, $8.50. Nearly 300% higher. Potatoes, many times in this place, farmer gets 99 cents, $3.90 in Woolworths. I mean, how much longer do you accept this? No country on earth. England is actually the worst, and the big 6 have only 36% of the market. Here, the big 2 must certainly have 80%, but I'd say closer now to 90% of the market. And remember, the market they don't have are tiny little towns. They've still got about 10% of Australia's population. No one would put a supermarket there, so they're not interested. But how much longer can this go on for? The week after the pig stunt, 7 political parties said they were moving legislation. Well, here comes the legislation again. It doesn't reduce their market share. The honourable member from Hobart and myself, our legislation reduces their market share by law over 5 years to 20% of the market. At present, they have over 40% each. So that would be 20%. And foreign corporations have only 5%. So Aldi can return themselves to Europe, where they came from, as far as I'm concerned. But that's the legislation. There's no easy way to do this. You either do it, or you just keep fooling around and just make the people more angry and more angry with you, because they know all you're doing is politics. You're in big trouble. The pig suit's got you in big trouble. All of Australia is screaming for your throat. So what you do is run along. You already had your 15th inquiry in 15 years. And they got a bit scared, so they come out a bit brutal, the inquiry as well, which is a bit different from the inquiries. But as Winston Churchill said, if you absolutely want and must not do it, then of course you must have an inquiry. And the wider the terms of reference, of course, the less likely it is to hit any target. And that's what we're watching here once again. Look, I applaud the government for putting a bit of a scare up, but you will not do the thing that is required to be done. I don't know about other people, but I used to take $60 down to the supermarket when my wife was away and I'm fending for myself. Now I take $160 down. I just can't believe. And even the statistics would indicate the horrific markup that exists in Australia. They are not showing profits, I might add. The consumers, the shareholders are not getting a benefit from this, because the profits are going to maintaining a monopoly of 2 in the marketplace. That is where the profits are going. And of course, the corporates are paying themselves $13 million a year. $13 million a year.
Time has expired. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The cost of living is the #1 concern in my community. Many are struggling to afford everyday essentials. As their representative, we have a duty to protect them from unfair business practices. While global events such as COVID-19 and the conflict in Ukraine have disrupted supply chains and pushed up prices, some companies have exploited these circumstances to boost their profits at the expense of Australian families. Our government is taking action to address these practices. We've launched one of the biggest crackdowns on supermarkets in history, forcing transparency, accountability, and fair pricing. Our step was to launch an inquiry into price gouging by supermarkets and to provide price comparisons across Coles, Woolworths and Aldi. These 3 retailers control 75% of the market, yet the code regulating their conduct with suppliers has been voluntary and lacked real penalties. Under Labor, this will change. We are making the code mandatory for supermarkets with revenue exceeding $5 billion. By introducing enforceable rules and meaningful penalties, we are ensuring farmers and families get a fair go. Our government is also tackling misleading practices head on. The government is taking Woolworths and Coles to court for fake discounts. This is where they have been accused of inflating prices only to apply a discount sticker, falsely advertising deals while charging more than the original price. We are also addressing shrinkflation, where companies reduce product sizes but keep prices at the same rate. If you think your packet of chips or box of cereal have been getting smaller, you are probably right. As the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said, we don't see ordinary Australians, families and pensioners, we don't want to see ordinary Australians, families and pensioners being taken for a ride by supermarkets. We are taking steps to ensure that they get a fair go at the checkout. To back this up, we've committed $30 million in additional funding to the ACCC to enforce these measures. This what happens when a government properly equips and supports its regulator to do their job. Under the Liberals, regulators were weakened and the big businesses were left unchecked. Labor is reversing this trend by strengthening our consumer regulator to ensure fairness at the checkout. We are also addressing hidden fees on digital payments. While card payments are now a commonplace, many Australians have been hit with sneaky charges. The Albanese government is preparing to ban excessive debit card surcharges, pending advice from the Reserve Bank of Australia. This reform will put more money back in Australians' pockets while helping small businesses compete fairly against larger retailers who often use their size to waive these fees. Deputy Speaker, I always say, cash is king. By 2026, we will require businesses selling essential goods such as groceries, medicines and fuel to accept cash. Like 1.5 million Australians, I still use cash for more than 80% of my transactions. And we are doing this to ensure Australians have access to necessities, even in situations where digital systems fail. In a world more and more reliant on computers, we cannot afford to let bad software update disrupt people's ability to access essential goods. Deputy Speaker, our actions are clear. We are standing up for Australians at the checkout, ensuring they are not taken advantage of by big corporations. By enforcing stronger regulations and fairer codes, we are setting a new standard, one that protects all Australians and holds businesses accountable. These reforms send a strong message. We will not stand by while families struggle and corporations profit unfairly.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Casey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As someone who spent over 10 years working in the grocery industry in fast-moving consumer goods before I came to this place, it is one of many things that I'm passionate about, but making sure that the supermarkets look after their suppliers and the Australian people is absolutely one of those. But let's be absolutely clear. This code of conduct will not reduce prices at the supermarket at all. This code of conduct is about ensuring that Woolworths and Coles treat their suppliers and farmers with the respect that they deserve, given the market size that they have. And that is an absolutely crucial and important endeavour. But for the government to wrap that up as a cost of living measure to reduce price shows two things. They're either misleading the Australian people or they're ignorant and they don't understand how the supermarket and grocery chains and the mandatory code or the voluntary code actually work. And that's a question that the Prime Minister should answer, because the mandatory code, as I said, will not bring prices down. But when I look at this motion from the member for Hawke, I must say it does bring out the best in the hypocrisy of the Albanese Labor government. And I want to go, Deputy Speaker, to point 2, and I'll quote from it. It notes the Australian government believes that alleged misconduct in the supermarket sector is unfair, unacceptable, and it makes cost of living pressures worse for Australians. So they are prepared as a government to put in a motion in this House about conduct that is before the courts at the moment with the ACCC. They're prepared to talk about that in a motion. But whenever a government minister, whether it's the Prime Minister or the Treasurer or others in this government, are asked about Cbus and are asked about the disgraceful conduct of Cbus, not paying out insurance payments and death payments to people who have died, to their loved ones, including members of my community, when they're asked about that, they say that, oh no, we can't talk about that because it is before ASIC. And this is the hypocrisy of the Albanese Labor government and the Treasurer. He will palm off innocent Australians who won't get their money that they are entitled to because a loved one has died. And the reason he doesn't want to talk about it is that his mentor, the former Treasurer of this country, now National President of the ALP, is the CBUS chair. Shame on the ALP and the Australian government. They are not prepared to stand up for the Australian people, for the members of CBUS who have lost loved ones who can't get their money, and they say they can't talk about that because it is before ASIC. Yet at the very same time, they are prepared to bring a motion to the House to discuss the allegations against Woolworths and Coles that are currently before the ACCC. Woolworths and Coles are literally testifying to the ACCC. So we can talk about that in a motion in this House, but they won't answer questions about the misconduct of CBUS, the alleged misconduct of the now National President of the ALP. Talk about the hypocrisy of the Albanese Labor government. We'll say one thing in here, we'll spin a line, but they won't stand up for the Australian people when it involves their friends. So let's talk about Woolworths and Coles. I'll get on to Woolworths and Coles, very happy to. That's enough time, Member for Kennedy, I've spoken about it a lot. But I want to talk about the Melbourne wholesale market and the Labor government that are increasing the rents by 6 to 7.6% per year at the fresh fruit markets in Epping in Victoria. This decision is going to drive prices up. It is going to cause farmers to suffer, have to pay more, and it's actually going to send more market share to Woolworths and Coles, because Woolworths and Coles do not need to go to the markets to buy their fruit and vegetables. Hospitality venues do, independent supermarkets do, independent fruit and grocery stores in my electorate and across the country rely on the Melbourne wholesale market to get their products and be competitive at a price level against Woolworths and Coles. The Victorian Labor government, with not a word from the Albanese Labor government, are increasing prices by over 6 to 7% for the next decade. It is going to increase the market share of Woolworths and Coles. It is going to drive the price of fruit and vegetables up for Australian people. It is another example of Labor at a federal level and a state level moving motions, talking spin, but not actually solving the challenges of the Australian people.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made an order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clock.
Private members' business, notice number 8, relating to rural, remote and regional health, standing in the name of Dr Webster.
I call the member for Malley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to rural, remote and regional health in the terms in which it appears in the notice paper.
Member for Malley has the call.
I don't need a seconder. I move this motion supporting regional healthcare because there is incredible heartache, or in departmental speak, unmet need, both within my electorate of Malley and across rural, regional and remote Australia. A person's postcode should not determine their health status, but it does. As Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health, I have travelled the country to consult with professional organisations, health professionals and community members at the coalface. They have stressed the dire nature of workforce shortages in their local areas. There are currently 6 general practitioner positions advertised in Mildura, my home city, alone, with several other towns across Malley also looking for a local doctor. In fact, I am very proud of the fact that my husband has retired after 47 years in general practice just this week. We know that small, and I will shout out to him what an extraordinary man he is and how proud I am of him. We know that small rural towns like Dimboola in my electorate, for example, have on average almost 60% fewer health professionals than major cities. When one of my constituents needs care for a chronic condition or an ongoing illness, for example, they face waiting lists, travelling considerable distances and additional out-of-pocket costs. Inaccessible healthcare results in delays to primary care, people presenting to hospital acutely unwell when it could have been prevented, and ultimately regional Australians living with worse health and dying younger than their city counterparts. We can't continue to expect people in rural, regional and remote Australia to put up with second-rate access to healthcare. It affects their quality of life, their livelihood and their longevity. During my travels, I have also seen examples of rural communities who are making things work. I visited a single employer model pilot site at the Riverland Regional Hospital in Berry last year. They told me they have no doctor shortage in their region thanks to this model. The single employer model's success in rural and regional Australia builds upon the National's efforts for many years to develop the National Rural Generalist Pathway through the National Rural Health Commissioner. In fact, the first Commissioner, Professor Paul Worley, was in that meeting in Berry last year about the Single Employer Model Initiative because he has been working there, ensuring its success since his term as Commissioner ended. In October, I was delighted to speak at the Conference of Services for Australian Rural and Remote Allied Health, SARA, in Mildura. The Allied Health Rural Generalist Pathway, developing the skills required to increase rural and remote allied health workforce, has existed in several states and territories since 2014 and in the non-government and private sector since 2019. Disappointingly, it does not exist as yet in the Victorian public sector. Rural generalist pathways warrant further development across the professions. The current Albanese Labor government has not had the needs of rural, regional and remote Australians front of mind when it comes to health. Implementing policies such as changes to the distribution priority areas, which have resulted in a net flow of international medical graduate doctors away from the regions to peri-urban settings, exacerbating workforce shortages. Their signature policy of tripling the bulk billing incentive payment might have looked good on the surface, but it has not brought about more doctors to the regions, nor does it adequately cover the burgeoning costs of running a general practice. The Nationals are working on significant regional health policies to improve the supply of doctors and other health professionals in rural, remote and regional Australia. As Shadow Assistant Minister, I have been developing bold policies to immediately address our dire health workforce shortages and facilitate structural reform to grow our own supply of doctors and other health professionals in the regions into the future. And I must name the Member for Parkes, Mark Colton, who has today announced his valedictory speech and the work that he has done previously to ensure better healthcare into the future for regional Australia.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Second the motion. I reserve my right to speak.
For Riverina, thank you. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And the federal Labor government is committed to strengthening healthcare services and our regional healthcare workforces right across this great country that is Australia. And as a practising emergency department doctor at Wyong Hospital, I understand firsthand the importance of a robust regional health workforce, particularly in primary care. We know that our primary care clinicians, some of whom are present here today in this chamber, know that if you can treat an illness at the primary care level in those clinics, then you stop those diseases from exacerbating and then ending up seeing me in the middle of the night. Now, following my election in 2022, one of the first actions made by the federal Labor government was to bolster doctors on the Central Coast by changing the region to a distribution priority area. The distribution priority area classification identifies locations in Australia with a shortage of general practitioner services, and changing the region to a DPA has meant that general practices across the region of the Central Coast, that's Robertson, that's Dobell, that's a little bit of Shortland, as I like to remind the Minister, that they have access to a greater pool of doctors, of available doctors. And I note that recent data from the Department of Health highlights that since we came into government, Australia last year added 1 new doctor every hour on average, with more doctors joining in the last 2 years than at any time in the past decade. And according to the department, an additional 17,846 new medical practitioners registered to practice in the last 2 financial years. The 2022-2023 cohort of 8,356 new doctors was the largest influx of new doctors in more than a decade, and that record was beaten in the 23-24 when 9,490 new doctors registered to practice. This means that more doctors are registering to practice in Australia. More junior doctors are training to become GPs, and more medical graduates are aspiring to become GPs since the federal Labor government's record investments in strengthening Medicare. In 2024, close to 1 in 5 medical graduates aspired to have a career in general practice or rural general practice, with 17.5% of graduates nominating general practice or rural generalism as their preferred specialty in the annual Medical Deans Survey. Now, in addition, Deputy Speaker, the number of junior doctors choosing to go into general practice grows each year. In 2024, more than 1,600 doctors accepted a place on a government-funded training program to become a GP or rural GP, a 13% increase from the year before. In 2025, more than 1,750 offers are expected to be made to junior doctors to begin government-funded GP training, leading to an intake that could be up to 10% larger than 2024. The federal Labor government's work to improve healthcare services and regional healthcare workforces does not stop here, however, Deputy Speaker. On the Central Coast, in the Electorate of Robertson, 38 general practices received grant funding between $25,000 and $35,000 through the Strengthening Medicare General Practice Grants program. The federal Labor government has provided general practices across Australia funding to make improvements to their practices to expand patient access and support safe and accessible and quality primary care. For example, in my electorate, Terrigal Medical and Avoca Medical Centres combined received $60,000. The funding has enabled both practices to become re-accredited, as well as to build a new consulting room in the Terrigal practice. Additionally, the funding has enhanced both practices for infection control and enabled the upgrade of essential equipment. The federal Labor government is working hard every day to strengthen healthcare on the Central Coast, especially in primary care. Another to mention, Deputy Speaker, is the Saratoga Medical Centre. They also received a grant of $25,000 from the Strengthening Medicare General Grants program to update its IT systems. This funding helped improve patient access and has ensured upgrades to critical IT systems that are essential for general practices to function successfully. Whether it's training more GPs, tripling of the bulk billing incentive, or investing in our general practices, only a federal Labor government can be trusted to protect and trusted to strengthen healthcare services and our regional healthcare workforces across Australia. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Lyne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This motion is a really important issue, or it speaks to a really important issue, and that is health workforce. Many years of experience in the medical profession, in fact 33 of them, were preceded by me working in the hospital system as a hospital cleaner, a central sterilising agent, a wardsman, and a med student. And I saw all sorts of hospitals in my training. I saw the old multiple people, like 18 beds in a row down one side, 18 down the other side, with just curtains between. None of this private room rubbish. That was Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, and that was built in about the 1870s, 1880s, named after Prince Alfred, who got shot by somebody when he came out here in a visit in the 1860s. Through to the Chris O'Brien Centre, the other end of the extreme, or St Vincent's in Melbourne or Sydney. And the thing that makes the quality good, it's like the F1. It's not just the car, it's the driver. And health workforce is what makes Australia's health system great. Because many places have Nobel Prize winners, and Australia's got plenty of them in our health workforce, but it's a uniform high standard across Australia. Whereas some countries, it's all over the shop because they don't have a good health training system. A lot of them just get book knowledge. Anyone can be a doctor. You just go to uni and buy the books and you get a medical degree. Germans, Italians used to come out here to get training as med students because they heard that we actually got to see patients. Okay, but Houston, we have a problem. Australia doesn't have enough health workforce in rural Australia, from pharmacists to physios to OTs through to doctors, nurses and whatever. And the National Party, because of our roots, feels this acutely more than what you do in Sydney. There's an overall shortage of GPs. As the member mentioned, the number of people who want to do general practice now is only about 15 to 17% in the Dean's survey. When I graduated, about the same time as your husband, or a bit after him, it was over 50%. And we've got specialists for the left toe, for the right ankle, for everything. There's only square inches of the human anatomy that are looked after by one specialist. And in a big city place, you need about 10 doctors to look after a general medical patient. Whereas in the country, a generalist does it all.
That's right.
And that's the beauty, because everything's connected to everything in human bodies. And we have been at the forefront of developing rural health workforce. Due to the snakes and ladders of political life in this building, unfortunately I wasn't there to announce the Stronger Rural Health Strategy. That fell to my successor and I got put into children and families. But I do remember negotiating with University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, La Trobe Uni, Monash Uni, getting medical schools created on the Sunshine Coast because a wicked sandstone university was convinced to give up a lot of their extra places. Yeah. And so the people in the seat of Fairfax and Fisher have the Sunshine Coast Medical School. The Queensland University at the tip of the point up there in Cairns and James Cook Uni, they were beneficiary of extra spots. We had Charles Sturt Uni the National Party created that med school because we got them a bunch of medical Commonwealth supported places and we partnered them to start off with Western Sydney Uni. And then I came back again on a second life in the health portfolio and got them a rural medical school, even though their school is rurally based. Unfortunately, the member that was the beneficiary of that chose to sit on another part of the building, but there we go. We were just so pleased that we got it for people in country Australia because they have been shortchanged. Convincing Melbourne Uni to give La Trobe students a pathway into a Melbourne Uni degree was another stroke of genius, and I worked on that. So I've been at the forefront of getting all these expansion. The HECS debt relief for nurse practitioners who go remote, they only have to do, they get 2 for 1 years off. Same with doctors. The Stronger Rural Health Strategy is a really good example of that. But we need more pharmacists, we need more physios, we need everything, because it's the professionals that are important, not necessarily the buildings. Thanks.
And I thank the member for Lyon for his contribution. The question before the Federation Chamber is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, living in a regional area of New South Wales, I'm all too aware of how difficult it can be to see a doctor. This government knows that too many Australians are struggling to get in to see a GP, and that's why we're strengthening Medicare, and it's why we're doing everything we can to attract, train and retain more doctors, especially in regional areas like Gilmore. We made an election commitment to make it easier for Australians to see a doctor, and that's exactly what we're doing. The University of Wollongong's Shoalhaven Graduate School of Medicine, located in my electorate of Gilmore, has produced many doctors that continue to live and work in our region. Doctors that study at UOW's Shoalhaven campus are staying on and working as general practitioners in our community, and medical specialists at Shoalhaven and Milton Ulladulla hospitals. Former Milton pharmacist Amanda Venables was one of the first graduates from the Shoalhaven School of Medicine, and she now works both in a private family medical practice and as an anaesthesiast at Shoalhaven and Milton hospitals. As a small business owner and mum, Dr Venables had long thought about studying medicine, but it wasn't until the training opportunity became available closer to home that her dream career became a reality. By providing local students with a chance to study and then go on to practice in regional areas benefits the whole community. It provides a much-needed injection of new GPs and also provides patients with a continuity of care that is so important, especially for families and our older residents. This government funds more than $1.9 billion a year for programs that develop the workforce and support more equitable distribution of health professionals to areas of need, especially regional and rural locations. The Gilmore Electorate is seeing the benefits of this initiative. In 2024, more than 1,600 doctors accepted a place on a government-funded training program to become a GP, or rural GP, a 13% increase on the year before. The 2022-23 cohort of 8,356 new doctors was the largest influx of new doctors in more than a decade. Incredibly, that record was broken in 2023-24 when 9,490 new doctors registered to practice. We're investing in doctors and we're growing other areas of our health system by offering Commonwealth-supported university places, which subsidise up to 75% of tuition fees for eligible students studying a range of courses including public health, exercise physiology and medical biotechnology. Labor is also offering fee-free TAFE courses, providing more training in the areas of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander primary health care, allied health, disability support, mental health, aged care and nursing. And not only are we training more doctors, nurses and health workers, we're providing better access to their services, particularly in regional areas like Gilmore. In my electorate, we've opened the doors to a new Medicare urgent care clinic in Batemans Bay, Kiama Headspace, the Southeastern Endometriosis and Pelvic Pain Clinic, and the Shoalhaven Walk-in Adult Mental Health Hub. These services are free, which is taking some financial pressure off families who we know are doing it tough. Since opening, more than 7,000 patients sought care at the Batemans Bay Urgent Care Clinic, including Louise, who said she had a great first experience at the urgent care clinic with her toddler. She said the clinic was a great service to have in Batemans Bay. Jane turned up to have her eye checked on a Sunday, and after thinking she would have to wait for hours in emergency, she was seen immediately by a nurse, then a doctor, and sent on her way with the appropriate scripts. Best of all, her visit was all bulk billed on a weekend. How good is that? The people of Batemans Bay are loving their clinic, and the 2024 Albanese budget is investing a further $227 million so thousands more Australians can get the free urgent care they need, with another 29 additional Medicare urgent care clinics offering walk-in care 7 days a week over extended hours, completely bulk billed. There have been almost 400,000 visits to Medicare UCCs across Australia, and almost 1 in 3 visits have been for children under the age of 15. As a mum of 4, I know all too well that weekends with kids can be like, with little ones falling off bikes, footy bumps and twisted ankles on the soccer fields. So these clinics are proving just fabulous for families in terms of time, convenience and affordability. This government is delivering on its promise to provide more doctors, more health workers and accessible, affordable health care for all Australians.
And I thank the member for Gilmore. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I want to commend the member for Mallee, the Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health, on bringing to the Parliament this vital motion. And it is important, and if there's anybody in this place who would know just how integral it is to the success and the prosperity and the productivity of rural, regional and remote Australia, it is the member for Mallee, whose husband, my favourite Webster, Philip, husband of 47 years, is a long-serving GP at Mildura. And he understands fully well the pressures that the rural Victorian area faces, but rural Victoria is just like any other state. And I found it very interesting, intriguing in fact, to hear the East Coast Labor members coming in here and talking about distribution priority areas, like as if they would really know. Because when you really go out to regional Australia, to remote Australia, where you can kick the red dust around, there's just such a shortage of doctors. But for the Nationals, that shortage would continue. At least we have put forward, along with our regional Liberal cousins, policies that have helped ease the situation through the rural generalist pathway. And I commend the member for Parkes, who just gave a wonderful valedictory speech for the work that he did. The member for Lyne, who spoke earlier in this debate, and now the shadow minister at the bench, for the work that they have done, the work that they are doing, and the work that we will do in the future. And I look at the the Murray-Darling Medical School situation, particularly in Wagga Wagga, and we have a young student there, first-year student by the name of Madeline Ingram, educated at Mother Day Catholic College, just 23, in her first year at that wonderful facility. And it is a bright and shiny new facility, yet to be opened, 3-storey with a car park underneath. It's replacing the Harvey House, which is an old nurses' quarters, which has been used since 1936. But the important thing, as the member for Lyne said, it's not about buildings, it's about people. And in the work that Dr Gerard Carroll and Dr Nick Stevenson and others have done to make this a reality, to get the professionals in, to give of their own time, just as Dr Philip Webster has done for many, many years, to give of their own time to make sure that we get the best outcomes in rural and regional health, and that's what it's all about. But Madeline Ingram, she spoke to me there recently at the topping out ceremony on April 15. That's where the 18-metre height was reached for this building, which will overlook Edward Street in the medical precinct there, just right next to Wagga Wagga Base Hospital. And she talked about the 90 students that will learn there, and she talked about the importance of actually starting the course, the course to which ends up getting your doctor's degree, and doing it from start to finish in a rural setting. Because all too often in the past we've seen the students, the brightest and best, start their course, go off to Sydney to do a couple of years and never come back. They'd fall in love with somebody, just like the member for Mallee did all those many, many years ago. Not too many member for Mallee, but you get my drift. But indeed, we want our student doctors to learn from the best, as in Doctors Carroll and Stevenson and others. We want our doctors to be able to have beautiful new infrastructure, that they can feel the ambience, they can feel that there is a future in a rural setting. And we want them also to be let loose, so to speak, on our rural patients. Yep. Because it shouldn't be that when you're in pain you catch a plane, you have to catch a plane. It should be that our regional hubs, such as Wagga Wagga, Orange, Mildura, Shepparton, Dubbo, we have got those rural medical school through that Murray-Darling network. We have got the buildings, we have got the people, we have got the political will, thanks to the National Party. Thanks to the National Party, because it's been the National Party who pushed that, it's been the National Party that's delivered that, and I'm so very proud that it is making a difference, along with all the other options and policies that we've got forward and that we will bring forward to the next election. The member for Mallee is right when she says that the burden of disease experienced in the population increases with geographic remoteness. And it's not right, it's not fair, and let's not forget that it was these regional and remote Australians who carried this country during the COVID pandemic. They were the ones who still mined, they were the ones who still farmed, they were the ones who helped our balance of payments, and they're the ones we should never neglect, never ever neglect, and make sure they've got the best health outcomes for them in the future.
And I thank the member for Riverina. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The regions bear a heavier burden of disease than any other part of Australia. And within my electorate, I have regional areas, I have remote, rural areas, and I have remote. Kangaroo Island is classified as a remote area, and I'm very conscious of the regional health inequity that exists in my community. And so I'm delighted to lend my support to the member for Mallee's motion and join her call asking for government and the minister to advance rural generalist pathways in medicine, nursing and allied health. As well as significant staffing shortages in the regions and the tyranny of distance to access metropolitan services, those of us living in the regions receive less health spending per person.
Absolutely.
If you live in the regions, you are less likely to have affordable and timely access to a GP. You are less likely to have access to diagnostic services such as regional breast care screening. If you need to see a cardiologist, you'd want to hope you live within 50 kilometres of CBD. Rural Australia produces at least 80% of Australia's exports. Yep. We do 90% of Australia's foods. We feed the nation. And 50% of our tourism revenue, despite housing only a third of our population. Yet rural health care remains critically underfunded, and rural outcomes in our communities, from a health perspective, is vastly inferior. Rural areas have up to 50% fewer health providers, such as general practitioners, physiotherapists, psychologists, dentists, my goodness. Yeah. How much do we love a dentist in the region? Pharmacists, optometrists, podiatrists. So much fewer than those in the major cities. In fact, remote communities bear 1.4 times the total disease burden compared to those in major cities, and we receive less funding on a per capita basis despite that. Analysis commissioned by the Rural Health Alliance shows that in 2020-2021 there was a $6.5 billion gap in expenditure on healthcare in rural Australia compared to the cities. Expenditure on health services for a person living in rural Australia sits at $848 per person per year than their metropolitan counterpart. That's the difference in between, largely due to a lack of affordable healthcare in regional, rural and remote Australia. This equates to a gap of $6.55 billion between metro and rural. I've previously raised some of these issues, including the closures of many of our rural general practices in my electorate, and we are not the most remote. Kangaroo Island is remote, but many parts of Mayo are accessible within an hour and a half. Of course, that's if you've got a car from the metropolitan area, but we're feeling it. We're feeling it with the closure of GPs. And often it's because the GPs have with the changes the government made, were able to now be classified, particularly if they're overseas MPs, they can work in places like Morphett Vale, they can live in Malvern, they can live in North Adelaide and go out to Elizabeth, and that's how people from overseas can get around the system now, because they change it, I think, from being MM5, the member will know, down to MM2. And what that means is that we've had a real shrinking of the workforce, particularly with our GPs. As an aside, I'd also like to speak to the support for the General Practice Registrars Australia call to address the GP workforce shortage more generally. The GPRA has asked government to fund an independent GP Registrars Employment Fund comprising of a base rate wage, a supplement for the first year for GP registrars, and an independent GP training fund support. These are the kinds of initiatives we need. Our country kids, the smart country kids that go off and do their medical degree, we need every avenue possible to get them back into the regions so that they can work in the place that they know. We desperately need them, because if we don't have health services across our regions, people just can't live in the regions. Yeah. And we need people to live in the regions, because otherwise the rest of us are going to starve. We grow the food, we support the nation, we grow the fibre, and yet we are country cousins. We are second-class citizens when it comes to health in this nation, and the government really needs to address this. And I again thank the member very much for her motion on this. We need to talk more about rural health in this place.
And I thank the member for Mayo for her contribution. There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned, and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. And I give the call to the member for Holt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
And I thank the member for Holt. Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion.
And I thank the Leader of the Australian Greens and the member for Melbourne. The question is that the motion to adjourn be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 4 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday the 19th of November 2024.